Copier public car when my only daughter told me to just die in silence. I hung up the phone with trembling hands and cried myself to sleep. 3 days later, I won $400 million in the state lottery. That's when I realized fate has a sense of humor crueler than any comedian I've ever known. If you're watching this story unfold, go ahead and subscribe. Comment below if you've ever had someone come crawling back after they showed their true colors. Trust me, this gets messier than a toddler with birthday cake. The morning I made that call, I'd been so hopeful. For the first time in nearly 5 years, I had news that might bridge the growing canyon between my daughter Rebecca and me. Something that might make her proud. Something that would prove I wasn't the burden she seemed to think I was. I'd gotten the job. At 63 years old, with arthritis gnawing at my knuckles and knees that protested every stare, I'd landed a position as a part-time librarian assistant. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't going to make me rich. But it was dignity. It was purpose. It meant I wouldn't have to ask Rebecca for money again. Not after the last time when she'd sighed so heavily I thought she might collapse from the effort. I'd rehearsed exactly what I would say. How I'd keep my voice casual, not desperate for her approval. How I wouldn't mention that I'd gone to 4 interviews before this one, or how the young manager had looked at my gray hair with barely concealed skepticism. I wouldn't tell her I'd worn the blue blouse she'd given me 3 Christmases ago, the one still with tags because it had been too nice to waste on my everyday life. I dialed her number at exactly 10:15 a.m. Not too early to disturb her morning routine, not during work hours when she'd be busy, not during her lunch when she'd be with colleagues. I'd memorized her schedule over the years, plotting my rare calls into the narrow windows when she might actually answer. When she picked up on the 4th ring, I felt a flutter in my chest. Her voice came through with that crispness that reminded me of her father, direct, impatient. "Mom? What is it now?" Just 4 words, and already I could feel her pulling away, as if my name on her caller ID had been a trap she'd accidentally sprung. "Rebecca, honey, I have some good." She cut me off. "I don't have time for this. Whatever bill you can't pay or whatever problem you've got, I can't help you."
Stop calling me, Mom.
"I'll not pay for your nursing home bills. Just die in silence." The venom in her voice wasn't new, but the words, they were arrows tipped with a poison I hadn't tasted before. My tongue felt suddenly thick, my throat closing around whatever joy I'd planned to share. "I understand," I managed to whisper, though I didn't understand at all. "I won't bother you again." I hung up gently, as if the phone itself might shatter along with my heart. For hours, I sat in my faded armchair by the window, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Was it after her father died? Was it when I couldn't afford to help with her wedding? Or had it been building slowly, silently, a resentment growing like a tumor neither of us had detected until it was malignant? That night, I dragged myself to my night shift at Daniel's Grocery, where I'd been stocking shelves for nearly 7 years. My supervisor, Margie, took one look at my face and steered me toward the break room. "Lord in heaven, Eleanor, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her round face pinched with concern. "What happened?" I shook my head, unwilling to speak the words aloud. To say them would make them real, would force me to admit that my only child, the baby I'd nursed through colic and croup, the teenager I'd worked double shifts to put through dance classes and SAT prep, the young woman whose college tuition had emptied my savings and maxed out 3 credit cards, wished me dead. "Nothing," I lied. "Just tired." Margie didn't believe me. In 15 years of friendship, she'd never believed a single one of my "I'm fine" declarations. But she had the kindness not to push. "Well, when you're ready to talk about nothing, I've got a bottle of Pinot Noir and a shoulder that's good for crying on." She patted my arm and left me alone with my cooling coffee and thundering thoughts. I worked that night like a sleepwalker, mechanically shelving cans and boxes, straightening displays, helping the occasional late-night shopper find the cereal aisle or the bathroom tissue. At 1 a.m., when my shift ended, Margie insisted on driving me home. "You're in no state to drive, Ellie," she said firmly. "And don't argue with me. I've known you since we both had natural hair color." Too exhausted to protest, I let her chauffeur me to my small apartment in the older part of town. As we pulled up to the curb, she turned to me, her eyes serious in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." For a moment, I almost broke, almost let the dam burst, almost told her how my daughter had casually suggested I die alone and silent. But shame kept my lips sealed. What kind of mother raises a child who could say such things? What kind of failure must I be? "I know," I said instead. "Thank you, Margie. I'll be fine after some sleep. Promise me you'll call if you need anything," she insisted. "Day or night?" I nodded, knowing I wouldn't call. I'd spent a lifetime handling my problems alone, ever since Frank died when Rebecca was just 11. The notion of burdening someone else with my pain was as foreign to me as the idea of buying designer clothes or taking exotic vacations. Inside my apartment, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I navigated by memory through the small living room, past the kitchenette with its dripping faucet I couldn't afford to fix, and into my bedroom. I slipped out of my work clothes and into an old nightgown, then curled up on my side of the bed, still, after 15 years, leaving Frank's side untouched, as if he might someday return to claim it.
I didn't cry. Not then.
The pain had moved beyond tears into something deeper, a hollow ache that seemed to echo through my bones. I stared at the ceiling, watching headlights from passing cars create moving shadows, and wondered if Rebecca was right. Maybe it would be better to just fade away quietly, to stop being the embarrassing mother who couldn't keep up, couldn't afford the right clothes or vacations, couldn't be the polished, perfect grandmother to her 2 children that she clearly wanted. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and restless, haunted by dreams of Rebecca as a small child, her hand in mine, trusting me to keep her safe, then suddenly pulling away, running toward a darkness I couldn't follow her into. The next morning, I called in sick to the library. It would be my first official sick day, and on my very first scheduled shift. I felt terrible about it, but the thought of plastering on a smile and pretending everything was fine seemed impossible. Janice, the head librarian, was understanding. "These things happen, Eleanor. Just take care of yourself and come in tomorrow if you're feeling better." I spent the day in a fog, moving from bed to couch and back again, picking up books only to put them down unread after a few minutes. The television droned in the background, the news a distant murmur of problems larger than mine. I nibbled at toast I couldn't taste and sipped tea that grew cold before I remembered to drink it. By evening, shame had begun to harden into something else, a slow-burning anger that surprised me with its intensity. Who was Rebecca to judge my life? Who was she to wish me gone? I had sacrificed everything for her. Every dream I'd ever had, I'd set aside to make sure she had what she needed. While other mothers joined book clubs or took classes or dated after becoming widows, I'd worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. I'd gone without new clothes, without vacations, without even the small luxury of a dinner out, to make sure Rebecca had the opportunities one never did. And now, she wanted me to disappear. The anger carried me to my closet, where I pulled out the battered shoebox that held what little jewelry I owned. Most of it was costume, glass beads, and painted metal, but at the bottom, wrapped in a handkerchief, lay my engagement ring. Frank had saved for months to buy it, a small diamond in a simple gold setting. I'd stopped wearing it after his death, unable to bear the weight of it on my finger, the constant reminder of what I'd lost. Now, I slipped it on, the band looser than it had been 25 years ago. I looked at my hand, at the blue veins visible beneath papery skin, at the nails cut short and practical for work. "I am still here," I said aloud to the empty room. "I still matter." Newly determined, I showered and dressed with care, choosing clean jeans and a sweater that Rebecca had once complimented. I applied a touch of mascara and lipstick, small defiances against the depression that had threatened to swallow me. Then I drove to Danwell's, arriving an hour before my shift to find Margie. She was in the office, doing paperwork, and looked up in surprise when I knocked on the open door. "Ellie, I thought you weren't in until 10 tonight." "I'm not," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "But I need to talk to you." Her eyebrows rose, but she put down her pen and gave me her full attention. "I'm all ears." For the first time, I told someone about Rebecca's words, about how she'd told me to die in silence, about how the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing but a burden to be discarded. The words tumbled out, raw and painful, but somehow saying them aloud made them lose some of their power. Margie's face went through a series of expressions: shock, outrage, and finally a fierce protectiveness that brought tears to my eyes. That ungrateful little... She cut herself off, visibly struggling to control her anger. "Ellie, you listen to me. You are worth 10 of that girl. You hear me? 10. And if she can't see what an amazing mother she has, then that's her loss, not yours." But what did I do wrong? I asked the question that had been haunting me. Where did I fail her? "You didn't fail anyone," Margie said firmly. "Sometimes people just turn out wrong, no matter how well you raise them. My sister's boy is the same way. She gave him everything, and he treats her like dirt. It's not about you, Ellie. It's about her." I wasn't sure I believed her, but her certainty was comforting nonetheless. We talked until it was time for my shift, and by then, I felt steadier. Not healed, not whole, but at least able to stand without feeling like I might collapse. That night at work, I bought a lottery ticket. It was something I did occasionally when the jackpot grew large enough to make headlines. $5 a month, my one small extravagance. A ticket represented possibility, however remote. Dreams I couldn't otherwise afford to have. "Feeling lucky?" asked Jim, the night manager, as he rang up my ticket. I managed to smile. "Someone has to win, right?" "That's the spirit," he said, handing me the slip of paper. "Good luck, Eleanor." I tucked the ticket into my wallet and forgot about it. That night and the next day were about survival, about putting one foot in front of the other, about showing up to my first day at the library with my head held high, despite the hollow ache in my chest where my daughter's love used to be. The call came while I was shelving books in the children's section of the library. "Ms. Eleanor Winters?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, continuing to arrange picture books by author's last name. "This is Michael Delaney from the State Lottery Commission. I'm calling to inform you that you appear to be the sole winner of last night's drawing." I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "You purchased a ticket at Daniel's grocery yesterday evening, correct? With the numbers 4, 17, 23, 36, 42, and the mega number 19? Yes, I think so." My heart had begun to pound so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Ms. Winters, I'm very pleased to tell you that you've won the jackpot of $412 million. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the bookshelf to steady myself, barely hearing as Mr. Delaney continued to explain about verification procedures and claiming options and press conferences. $412 million. It was an incomprehensible number. More money than I had ever imagined possessing. "Ms. Winters? Are you still there?" "Yes, I managed." "I'm just surprised." "That's completely understandable," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "Most winners have a similar reaction. Now, we'll need you to come to our main office with a ticket and identification as soon as possible. Would tomorrow morning work for you?" "Tomorrow?" "Yes. I could do tomorrow." "What time? Would 9 a.m. suit you? And Ms. Winters, I strongly advise you not to tell anyone about your win until after you've met with our financial advisors. Lottery winners often find themselves suddenly very popular." I thought of Rebecca, of her cold dismissal, and something hardened in my chest. "That won't be a problem, Mr. Delaney. I don't have anyone to tell." After hanging up, I stood frozen among the colorful children's books, trying to process what had just happened. $412 million. Freedom. Security. The end of night shifts and aching feet and counting pennies at the grocery store. The end of being a burden. Rebecca's words echoed in my mind. "Stop calling me, Mom. Just die in silence." But I wasn't going to die. And I certainly wasn't going to be silent. Not anymore. I finished my shift in a daze, mechanically completing tasks while my mind raced with possibilities. When Janice asked if I was feeling all right, I blamed it on first day nerves and promised to be more focused tomorrow. A lie, since I had no intention of coming back.
Not now.
Not ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check that the lottery ticket was still in my wallet, still real, still mine. I made lists of all the things I could do, all the ways my life would change. I could buy a house, several houses. I could travel. I could donate to charities. I could never work another day in my life if I didn't want to. And Rebecca? What about Rebecca? The questions circled like a vulture, refusing to leave me in peace. Would I tell her? Would I share my newfound wealth? Did she deserve any part of this miracle after what she'd said? By dawn, I still had no answers, only a bone-deep exhaustion and the ticket clutched in my hand like a talisman. The lottery office was a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and security cameras. I arrived at 8:45 a.m., dressed in my best outfit, black slacks and a blue blouse, the same one I'd worn to my library interview. The security guard checked my ID, then escorted me to a conference room where 5 people waited. Mr. Delaney, whom I recognized from his ID badge, a woman he introduced as the lottery's legal counsel, 2 financial advisors, and a public relations specialist. For the next 3 hours, they explained my options. I could take a lump sum of approximately $210 million after taxes or annual payments over 30 years. They discussed tax implications, investment strategies, privacy concerns. The PR woman talked about the mandatory press conference scheduled for the following day, where my name and photo would be released to the public. Many winners choose to establish trusts or foundations, explained one of the financial advisors, a gray-haired man named Robert. It helps manage the money and can serve your philanthropic goals. And it keeps people from coming directly to you with their hands out, added the legal counsel bluntly. Because they will, Ms. Winters. Friends, family, strangers, everyone will suddenly have a desperate need, and you'll be their solution. I thought of Rebecca again, of how she dismissed me when she thought I needed money. Would she come back now, hand outstretched? The thought made my stomach clench. I need to think about all of this, I said finally. It's overwhelming. Of course, Mr. Delaney said kindly. But we do need your decision about the payment option before the press conference tomorrow. And we strongly recommend you engage a personal attorney immediately. I nodded, gathering the folders of information they'd provided. I'll let you know by this evening. As I stood to leave, the PR specialist, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa, touched my arm. One more thing, Ms. Winters. After the press conference, your life will change dramatically. You may want to consider staying in a hotel for a few days, somewhere with good security. People will be looking for you. The warning sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that aspect, that winning might make me not just wealthy, but also a target. Thank you, I said. I'll arrange something. Outside, the day was bright and cold, the November sun offering light without warmth. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the lottery building and trying to make sense of my new reality. I was rich, unimaginably rich. And tomorrow, everyone would know it, including Rebecca. I was watching the evening news when it happened. My face appeared on the screen, an old photo they must have pulled from public records. The anchor's voice was excited as he announced, "Breaking news tonight. We can now confirm that local resident Eleanor Winters, 63, is the sole winner of the $412 million lottery jackpot." Ms. Winters, a widow who works as both a grocery store clerk and a library assistant, purchased the winning ticket at Daniel's Grocery. The official announcement will come tomorrow morning at a press conference, but sources within the Lottery Commission have confirmed the win. Stay tuned for more on this developing story. My phone began to ring almost immediately. I stared at it in horror. How had they gotten this information? Who had leaked it? I hadn't told anyone, had followed the lottery official's advice to the letter. The caller ID showed Margie's name. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jim from the grocery store. Then Janice from the library. Then numbers I didn't recognize at all. The phone rang continuously, barely a breath between calls, until I finally turned it off completely. My hands were shaking. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I wasn't prepared. I hadn't decided what to do about Rebecca, Hadn't set up the legal protections the lawyers had recommended. Hadn't even packed a bag to stay elsewhere, as Vanessa had suggested. A sharp knock at my door made me jump. Then another, more insistent. A man's voice called, "Ms. Winters?" "Greg Palmer from Channel 7 News. We'd love to get a statement about your lottery win." I froze, hardly daring to breathe. More knocking, another voice, a woman this time, identifying herself as a reporter from the local paper. I crept to the window and peered through a crack in the curtains. There were 3 people on my small porch and 2 more by the curb, one with a camera on his shoulder. Panic rose in my throat. I retreated to my bedroom, closed and locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, trying to think. I needed to get out of here. Needed somewhere safe to go while I figured out my next steps.
But where?
I had no family besides Rebecca. Most of my friends were work acquaintances, not people I could impose on in a crisis. And hotels. Would they even let me check in with reporters following me? My phone, still powered off, seemed to grow heavier in my pocket. I knew who would be calling if I turned it back on. Rebecca. The daughter who had told me to die in silence would now be frantically trying to reach me. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. I was trapped in my own home, besieged by strangers hungry for a glimpse of the newly minted millionaire, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. All the money in the world couldn't buy me what I truly needed right now, someone who cared about Eleanor the person, not Eleanor the lottery winner. A fresh round of knocking, louder this time, made me flinch. They weren't going away. If anything, there seemed to be more voices now, more people gathering outside my small apartment. In desperation, I turned my phone back on. It immediately began to vibrate with incoming calls and messages. I ignored them all, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Martin Chen, the attorney who had handled Frank's life insurance policy years ago. We hadn't spoken in over a decade, but he was the only lawyer I knew personally. To my surprise, he answered on the second ring. Martin Chen. "Mr. Chen, this is Eleanor Winters. You probably don't remember me, but you helped me after my husband Frank died with his insurance." "Mrs. Winters, of course I remember you," he interrupted smoothly. "And if I'm not mistaken, you're having quite an eventful evening." I almost laughed at the understatement.
You could say that.
"I'm sorry to bother you after all this time, especially after business hours, but I didn't know who else to call. I need help." "Say no more," he said, his voice brisk and professional. "I assume you have reporters at your door?" "Yes, and I don't know how to make them leave. The lottery people said there would be a press conference tomorrow, but someone leaked the information early, and now." "Where do you live, Mrs. Winters?" I gave him my address, hope rising for the first time since the news broadcast. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he promised. "In the meantime, don't open the door for anyone. Don't answer any questions through the door, and don't answer your phone unless it's me calling back."
Can you do that?
"Yes," I said, relief making my voice shake. "Thank you, Mr. Chen." "Martin, please." "And Mrs. Winters? Congratulations on your win." After hanging up, I felt steadier. I had a plan now, or at least the beginnings of one. I would wait for Martin, let him handle the reporters, and figure out my next steps with professional guidance. I could do this. I would do this. I was gathering a few essentials to pack, assuming Martin would help me find somewhere else to stay tonight, when my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen, ready to ignore yet another unknown number, but froze when I saw the name. Rebecca. My daughter was calling me. The same daughter who, just days ago, had told me to stop calling her, to die in silence. The same daughter who couldn't spare 5 minutes to hear my good news about a part-time job but was now, undoubtedly, eager to discuss my $400 million windfall. My finger hovered over the accept button. Part of me, the mother who had loved her unconditionally for 35 years, wanted to answer. To hear her voice. To pretend, just for a moment, that she was calling out of concern for me, not for what I could now give her. But another part of me, the woman who had been deeply, unforgivably wounded, kept me from pressing that button. Rebecca had made her feelings clear. She'd drawn a line between us, defined our relationship in the cruelest possible terms. Money hadn't changed that reality. It had only illuminated it. I let the call go to voicemail. She called back immediately. And again. And again. Each time, I watched her name flash on the screen, feeling a strange mix of vindication and grief. On the sixth call, I turned the phone face down on the bed, unable to bear the sight of her name anymore. Outside, the voices had grown louder, more insistent. I heard someone, a man with a deep, authoritative voice, telling the others to step back, to clear the porch. Martin, I hoped, come to rescue me from this bizarre nightmare. A moment later, my phone rang again. I checked the screen. Not Rebecca this time, but a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. Mrs. Winters, it's Martin Chen. I'm outside your door with a security consultant. The reporters are being moved back to the street. Can you let us in? I hurried to the front door, checked through the peephole to confirm it was indeed Martin, older than I remembered, his black hair now threaded with silver, but unmistakable, and unlocked the door. Martin entered quickly, followed by a tall, broad-shouldered man he introduced as Derek, the security consultant. Both men scanned my small living room with professional eyes, taking in the modest furnishings, the decades-old television, the faded curtains I'd sewn myself. You'll need to pack enough for several days, Martin said without preamble. Derek has secured a suite at the Grand Hotel downtown under a false name. We'll take you out through the back entrance of your building to avoid the cameras. I nodded, grateful for his efficiency. I've already started packing. Just give me a few minutes. As I retreated to my bedroom, I heard Martin on his phone, his voice low and urgent. Yes, I need the trust documents prepared by morning. No, this takes precedence over everything else. Yes, I understand it's last minute, but this client requires immediate attention. I finished packing quickly, clothes, toiletries, medication, my few pieces of real jewelry, and important documents like my birth certificate and Frank's death certificate. As an afterthought, I added the photo album from my nightstand, the one with pictures of Rebecca as a child, before she became a stranger with my eyes and her father's unforgiving mouth. When I returned to the living room, Martin was waiting by the door, car keys in hand. Derek had disappeared. Derek is bringing the car around to the back, Martin explained. We'll leave in a few minutes. In the meantime, is there anything else you need from here? Anything irreplaceable? I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 15 years. It was small, shabby in places, but it had been my sanctuary. Now, with reporters outside and my face on the news, it felt violated somehow.
Exposed.
No, I said finally. There's nothing here I can't replace now. Martin's expression softened slightly. This is overwhelming, I know, but I promise you, we'll get through it step by step. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than he could possibly understand. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered my call. That's what lawyers are for, Mrs. Winters. To be there when the world goes crazy.
His phone buzzed.
He checked it, then nodded to me. Derek's ready. Let's go. We slipped out through the back door of my building, into an alley where a sleek black SUV waited, engine running. Derek stood beside it, scanning the area with watchful eyes. He opened the rear door as we approached, and Martin ushered me inside, then joined me while Derek took the driver's seat. As we pulled away, I couldn't resist looking back at my building, at the cluster of reporters still gathered at the front entrance, unaware that their quarry was escaping. It seemed surreal, like something happening to someone else, not to Eleanor Winters, who had lived such a quiet, unremarkable life until now. My phone, which I'd slipped into my purse, vibrated again. I knew without looking that it would be Rebecca. She would be frantic now, having seen the news, knowing what it meant, knowing that her mother, the mother she had dismissed and discarded, now held the power she had always craved. You might want to consider changing your phone number, Martin said, noticing my expression. Once the press conference happens tomorrow, you'll be inundated with calls. Family, friends, charities, scammers, everyone will want a piece of you. Family. The word echoed hollowly. I had only one family member left, and she had made her feelings about me perfectly clear. I'll think about it, I said. But for now, I need to keep this number. There's someone who might call that I need to hear from. Martin gave me a shrewd look, but didn't press. As you wish. But I recommend not making any significant decisions about sharing your wealth until after we've set up proper legal protections. Emotions run high in these situations, and promises made in the heat of the moment can be difficult to undo later. I nodded, though my thoughts were elsewhere. Would Rebecca apologize? Would she acknowledge what she'd said, how deeply she'd hurt me? Or would she pretend it had never happened, that our relationship had always been loving, always been strong? And the bigger question, the one that kept circling in my mind like a restless ghost, what would I do when she called? What would I say to the daughter who had wished me dead, now that I held the power to either fulfill her dreams or confirm her worst fears? The SUV glided through the nighttime streets, carrying me toward the luxury hotel where I would spend my first night as a millionaire. Outside the tinted windows, the city lights blurred like stars, beautiful but distant. Inside, I sat with my hands folded in my lap, the lottery ticket secure in my purse, and wondered how it was possible to have everything and nothing all at once. The Grand Hotel lived up to its name. My suite was larger than my entire apartment, with a sitting room, bedroom, and marble bathroom bigger than some studio apartments. The furniture was elegant, the linens crisp and white, the view from the 23rd floor spectacular. Derek did a security sweep while Martin made arrangements with the hotel manager to ensure my privacy. "No one knows you're here," Martin assured me when we were finally alone. "The suite is registered under my firm's name, and the staff has been instructed that the occupant is not to be disturbed or identified. You're as safe here as you can be until we figure out next steps." I sank onto the plush sofa, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day had drained me completely. "What happens now?" "Now you rest," Martin said kindly. "Tomorrow morning, I'll come by at 8 to accompany you to the press conference. After that, we'll meet with my colleagues to discuss setting up a trust and other legal protections for your assets. But for tonight, try to get some sleep." After he left, promising to return in the morning, I wandered through the suite in a daze. The opulence was almost offensive after my years of careful thrift. The minibar held tiny bottles of liquor that probably cost more than I made in an hour at Danwell's. The bathroom featured not just a shower but a deep soaking tub and robes so soft they felt like clouds. I ran my hand over one of the robes, then impulsively stripped off my clothes and put it on. The fabric settled around me like an embrace, warm and comforting. I padded back to the sitting room and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city I'd lived in all my life, but had never seen from this height, this remove. Somewhere out there was my apartment, likely still surrounded by reporters. Somewhere was Danwell's grocery, where I'd worked for 7 years without complaint. Somewhere was the library where I'd been so proud to be hired, even part-time. And somewhere was Rebecca's house in the suburbs, with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage and rooms I'd only seen in photos because I'd never been invited to visit. My phone vibrated again. I pulled it from my purse and saw 17 missed calls, 5 from Rebecca, the rest from numbers I didn't recognize. There were also dozens of text messages and voicemails. I ignored them all and set the phone on the coffee table, face down. Tomorrow, I would have to face the cameras, the questions, the sudden and unwanted fame that came with extraordinary fortune. Tomorrow, I would have to decide what to do about Rebecca, about the future, about the life I wanted to build from the ashes of the one I'd had. But tonight, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel something unexpected: power. For the first time in decades, I held all the cards. I could choose who to help, who to trust, who to forgive. I could reshape my world according to my own desires, not the constraints of necessity or the judgments of others.
It was terrifying.
It was exhilarating. It was mine. I slept that night in a bed wider than any I'd ever known, wrapped in sheets that felt like silk against my skin. I dreamed of Rebecca as a child, holding my hand as we crossed a street, looking up at me with complete trust. In the dream, I tried to tell her something important, something she needed to know, but no sound came from my lips. She kept walking, her hand slipping from mine, growing taller with each step until she was an adult, striding away without looking back. I called after her, my voice finally returning, but she didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me at all. I woke with tears on my cheeks and the first light of dawn painting the unfamiliar room in shades of gold. My new life was beginning, whether I was ready or not. The press conference was a blur of flashing cameras and shouted questions. I sat at a table with lottery officials, Martin at my side, while Mr. Delaney announced the details of my win to the assembled media. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my comments brief and general, following the script Martin and the PR specialist had helped me prepare. "I'm overwhelmed and grateful for this blessing," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I plan to take some time to consider how best to use this opportunity to help others as well as secure my own future." I declined to answer specific questions about my plans for the money, about my family situation, about my work history. Martin fielded most inquiries with practiced ease, deflecting the more intrusive ones and ending the conference after precisely 15 minutes. Afterward, in a private room away from the cameras, the lottery officials presented me with an oversized check, a prop for the photos, they explained, and the actual paperwork to process my win. I had decided to take the lump sum option, which meant I would receive approximately $210 million after taxes. $210 million. Even after hearing the figure multiple times, it remained abstract, unreal. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. More than I had ever dreamed of possessing. "The funds will be transferred to the trust account we're establishing," Martin explained as we left the lottery building through a secure exit, avoiding the reporters still gathered at the main entrance. "From there, we can discuss investment strategies and philanthropic initiatives at your discretion." I nodded, thinking not of investments or charities, but of Rebecca. She would have seen the press conference by now, seen me sitting there, composed and flanked by professionals, no longer the desperate mother she had dismissed so cruelly. What was she thinking? What was she planning? As if conjured by my thoughts, my phone rang. Rebecca again. This time, something made me answer. "Hello, Rebecca." "Mom." "Oh my God, Mom." Her voice was breathless, excited. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? Where are you?" I saw the press conference. I can't believe it. $400 million. No greeting. No acknowledgement of our last conversation. Just excitement about the money. The knot in my stomach tightened. "I'm fine," I said, my voice cooler than I'd intended. "I'm staying somewhere safe until things settle down." "Safe? What do you mean? Why didn't you call me? I could have helped you. I've been worried sick." The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Worried sick? The daughter who had told me to die in silence was now claiming concern for my welfare? "I've been busy," I said. "There's been a lot to arrange." Of course, she said quickly. "I understand. But Mom, we need to talk. In person. This is huge. Life-changing. We should be together as a family at a time like this."
Family.
The word stung like salt in an open wound. Where had this concern for family been 3 days ago? "I'm not available right now, Rebecca," I said. "I have meetings with attorneys and financial advisors all day." "Tomorrow then," she pressed. "I'll come to you, wherever you are. Just tell me where."
"Please, Mom."
"This is important." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. This was the conversation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The moment of truth between my daughter and me. "Rebecca," I said slowly, "do you remember our last conversation? Before the lottery." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What?" That's not important right now, Mom. What's important is that we're together, that we figure this out as a family." "It's important to me," I insisted, my voice growing stronger. "You told me to stop calling you. You told me to, and I quote, just die in silence. Those were your exact words, Rebecca. Do you remember saying that?" Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her calculating, deciding on the best approach. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, conciliatory. "Mom, I was stressed that day. Work was crazy, the kids were sick, Jason was traveling. I said things I didn't mean. You know I would never actually want that. You're my mother. No apology. No real acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Just excuses and a tepid reminder of our biological connection. I see, I said, feeling strangely calm now. Well, as I said, I'm very busy right now with legal matters. Perhaps we can talk another time. Mom, please, she said, an edge of desperation creeping into her voice. This is crazy. We need to see each other. We need to talk about what this means for our family, for the kids' future, for you. I finished quietly. What this means for you.
What?
No, that's not what Goodbye, Rebecca, I said, and ended the call. My hand was shaking as I lowered the phone. I had never spoken to my daughter that way before. Never cut her off, never denied her anything she truly wanted. It felt both terrible and strangely liberating. Martin, who had been discreetly occupied with his own phone during my call, glanced at me with concern. Everything all right? No, I said honestly, but it will be. He nodded, not pressing for details. Our next meeting is with the trust attorneys in my office. After that, we have appointments with financial advisors and a security consultant to discuss long-term arrangements. It's going to be a full day. I welcomed the busy schedule, the focus on practical matters. It kept me from dwelling on Rebecca's call, on the raw, complicated emotions it had stirred up. But even as I nodded and followed Martin to the waiting car, I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face my daughter in person. Would have to look into her eyes and decide whether the damage between us could ever be repaired, and if I even wanted it to be. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying me toward my new life, one meeting at a time. Behind us, reporters scrambled for their vehicles, determined to follow the newly minted millionaire wherever she went. They would be disappointed. Like my daughter, they would discover that Eleanor Winters was no longer so easily found, no longer so readily available. No longer dying in silence. I had found my voice, and the world was about to hear it roar. The first week after winning the lottery felt like living in someone else's skin. I moved through each day in a fog of disbelief, signing papers I barely understood, nodding at advice from experts whose job titles I couldn't pronounce, and sleeping in hotel suites bigger than homes I'd only seen in magazines. If you're still watching my story, hit that subscribe button now. Have you ever fantasized about what you'd do if someone who hurt you suddenly needed something from you? Comment below. I'm reading every single one. Mrs. Winters, I strongly recommend we proceed with a private security team, Martin said, sliding a contract across the polished conference table. At least for the next 6 months, until the media attention dies down. We were in his law firm's main conference room, a space so elegant it made me conscious of every movement, as if I might accidentally break something priceless. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below us, tiny cars and tinier people going about their ordinary lives, lives I no longer shared. Is it really necessary? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The reporters outside my apartment had been just the beginning. They'd found my workplace, harassed my coworkers, even tracked down old neighbors from the house where Frank and I had raised Rebecca. My face was on every local news channel and had made it to several national ones. Widow Wins Millions was apparently quite the human interest story. I'm afraid so, Martin said, his expression grave. It's not just the media. Lottery winners become targets, Mrs. Winters. For scams, for threats, sometimes even for violence. Your life has changed fundamentally, and your security needs have changed with it. I signed the contract without further argument. In the past week, I'd signed so many documents that my signature had evolved from its usual careful script to an efficient scrawl. Trusts, investments, property purchases, security arrangements, the business of being wealthy was, it turned out, almost a full-time job. Now, Martin continued, checking his watch, we have the meeting with the real estate agent at 2. She's bringing portfolios of available properties based on your criteria. After that, we'll meet with the estate planner to discuss long-term management of your assets, particularly as it relates to potential inheritances. Inheritances. Rebecca. The knot that had taken up permanent residence in my stomach tightened. About that, I said, choosing my words carefully. I'm not ready to make decisions about family inheritances just yet. Martin's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. Of course, those decisions can wait until you're ready. But if I may ask, have you spoken with your daughter recently? The question was delivered in the same professional tone he used to discuss tax implications or investment portfolios, but I felt the weight behind it. In our many meetings over the past week, I'd shared just enough about Rebecca for him to understand the situation, that we were estranged, that our last conversation before the lottery had been deeply painful, that she'd reached out immediately after news of my win broke. I hadn't told him exactly what she'd said to me. Some wounds were still too raw to expose even to compassionate professional eyes. She calls every day, I admitted. Sometimes more than once. I haven't answered since that first time after the press conference. And how do you feel about that? He asked, sounding more like a therapist than a lawyer. I looked out the window, at the city where I'd lived all my life, but which suddenly seemed foreign to me. How did I feel?
Angry.
Hurt. Vindicated. Powerful.
Guilty. Lost.
Too many emotions to name, all swirling together like oil and water, refusing to blend into anything coherent. I don't know, I said finally. Part of me wants to never speak to her again. Part of me misses my daughter. I turned back to him, needing him to understand. Not the woman who's calling me now, but the daughter I used to have. The little girl who loved me, who needed me. Martin nodded, his expression softening. That's perfectly understandable. And you don't have to decide anything right now. You have the luxury of time, Mrs. Winters. For perhaps the first time in your life, you can afford to wait, to consider all your options carefully.
Time.
Yes. That was the most unexpected gift of my new wealth. Not just money, but time. No more night shifts, no more working weekends, no more rushing from one job to another. No more squeezing in grocery shopping between exhausted collapses into bed. No more putting off doctor appointments because I couldn't afford to miss work.
Thank you, I said.
For everything you've been doing. I know you have other clients, important ones, but you've made me feel like I'm your only concern. You are an important client, he corrected gently. And not just because of your new financial status. You're important because you're a good person navigating an extraordinary situation with grace and dignity. That's worthy of respect. I blinked rapidly, touched by his words. In the whirlwind of the past week, Martin Chen had become more than just my attorney. He'd become my guide, my protector, sometimes even my confidant. At 63, I wasn't naive enough to mistake professional dedication for personal interest, but I was grateful nonetheless for his steady presence in the chaos my life had become. Now, he said, glancing at his watch again. Shall we head to the real estate meeting? Carla has some exceptional properties to show you, including a few not officially on the market yet. I nodded, gathering my purse, a new one, purchased at Martin's gentle insistence that my old bag with its worn straps and faded fabric wasn't appropriate for your current circumstances. The new purse was buttersoft leather in a deep burgundy, simple but unmistakably expensive. I still felt like an imposter carrying it, like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. As we rode the elevator down to the parking garage where Martin's driver waited, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't need to check it to know who was calling. Rebecca had been relentless in her attempts to reach me, escalating from calls to texts to voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. Her latest strategy was to use the children, my grandchildren, as emotional leverage. "The kids miss you, Mom," she'd said in her last voicemail. "They keep asking when they'll see Grandma. You wouldn't punish innocent children for adult problems, would you?" It was manipulative and unfair, especially since she'd rarely brought the children to visit me before. In the past 5 years, I'd seen them perhaps a dozen times, always at holiday gatherings hosted by friends where Rebecca couldn't avoid bringing them. She'd never invited me to their school events, their birthdays, their everyday lives. The grandchildren she now dangled as bait were practically strangers to me, loved from a distance I hadn't chosen. "You can turn it off, you know," Martin said quietly, noticing my expression as I silenced the phone without looking at it. "Change your number.
get some peace.
I know, I said, but I'm not ready for that yet. He didn't press, and I was grateful. The truth was, as painful as Rebecca's calls were, as transparent as her motives seemed, I couldn't bring myself to cut that final tie. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She was still my daughter, still the baby I'd held in my arms, still the child whose tears I'd dried and whose dreams I'd nurtured. The fact that she'd grown into someone who could wound me so casually didn't erase those memories, those years of love. But it did change how I would respond to her now. And that, perhaps, was the most difficult adjustment of all. The real estate agent, Carla Mendez, was a sleek woman in her 40s with perfect hair and a smile that managed to be both warm and professional at the same time. She met us in the private dining room of an upscale restaurant, where she'd arranged portfolios of properties across the gleaming table. "Mrs. Winters, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "I've selected properties based on your requirements: privacy, security, and proximity to the city. I think you'll be pleased with the options." For the next 2 hours, we pored over photographs and floor plans of homes I could never have imagined owning. Mansions with sweeping staircases and chandeliers. Penthouses with panoramic city views. Gated estates with manicured gardens and swimming pools. "This one might be of particular interest," Carla said, opening a leather portfolio to reveal a stunning property with stone walls and ivy-covered wings. "It's on 5 acres, completely fenced and gated, with a state-of-the-art security system. The main house has 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a library, a home theater, and a chef's kitchen. There's also a separate guest house, a pool house, and staff quarters." Staff quarters. The concept was so foreign I almost laughed. "Staff," I repeated. "What kind of staff?" Carla didn't bat an eye at my ignorance. Typically, a property of this size would have a housekeeper, perhaps a cook, a gardener, and, depending on your preferences, a personal assistant or butler. All of those positions can be filled through agencies that specialize in household staff for high-net-worth individuals. High-net-worth individuals. Another strange new phrase that apparently described me now. I looked at the photos again, trying to imagine myself living in such grandeur. Would I rattle around those vast rooms like a pea in an empty can? Would I ever feel at home amid such opulence? "It's beautiful," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure it's me." "I understand completely," Carla assured me. "Finding the right home is deeply personal. It needs to reflect not just your new financial status, but your personality, your comfort level." She selected another portfolio. Perhaps something like this might feel more approachable. The new property was smaller, though still enormous by my standards, with a warmer, more traditional design. 4 bedrooms instead of 6, gardens that looked lived in rather than manicured to perfection, a kitchen that, while still luxurious, seemed designed for actual cooking rather than just display. "This one," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'd like to see this one in person." Carla beamed. "Excellent choice. It's actually one of my favorites as well. Very elegant, but still has a soul, if you know what I mean. And the location is exceptional, private but not isolated, close to cultural amenities, but removed from the tourist areas." We arranged to tour the property the following day, and as Carla packed up her portfolios, Martin excused himself to take a phone call. Left momentarily alone with the real estate agent, I found myself asking a question that had been nagging at me. "Ms. Mendez, Carla, can I ask you something personal?" She looked up curious. "Of course, Mrs. Winters." "How long does it take?" At her puzzled expression, I clarified. "To feel normal. When everything in your life has changed overnight. When you suddenly have all this. I gestured vaguely at the luxurious dining room, the portfolios of million-dollar homes, my own new clothes and accessories. Understanding softened her features.
"Ah."
"The adjustment period." She considered for a moment before answering. "In my experience with clients who've had sudden financial changes, lottery winners, yes, but also people who've inherited unexpectedly or sold businesses for large sums, it varies widely. Some adapt quickly, within months. Others take years to feel comfortable in their new circumstances. Years, I echoed, my heart sinking a bit. But, she added gently, those who adjust most successfully tend to be those who stay true to themselves, to their core values. They use their new resources to enhance their lives, not to become different people. She smiled. From what Martin has told me about you, Mrs. Winters, I think you'll navigate this transition with grace. You seem like someone who knows who she is. Her words stayed with me as we left the restaurant, as we attended the meeting with the estate planner, as we finally returned to my hotel suite late that afternoon. Someone who knows who she is. Did I? Had I ever? For so long, I defined myself by my roles. Frank's wife, Rebecca's mother, a store clerk, a woman who worked hard and asked for little. Now, with Frank long gone, Rebecca estranged and no need to work, who was I? Perhaps that was the real challenge of my new circumstances, not adjusting to wealth, but discovering who Eleanor Winters truly was when stripped of all the identities that had defined her for decades. The house was even more beautiful in person than in photographs. As we walked through sunlit rooms with gleaming hardwood floors and large windows overlooking mature trees, I could almost imagine myself living there. Almost. The previous owners did a complete renovation 5 years ago, Carla explained as we toured the kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. New electrical, new plumbing, new roof, all the important but unsexy updates that make a difference in day-to-day living. They were planning to stay here indefinitely, but he received an unexpected job offer overseas that was too good to refuse. I ran my hand over the island countertop, cool and smooth beneath my fingers. This kitchen was bigger than my entire apartment's living room and dining area combined. It's lovely, I said honestly. Wait until you see the master suite, Carla said with a knowing smile. It's truly special. She wasn't exaggerating. The master bedroom was a retreat unto itself, with a sitting area, a fireplace, and French doors leading to a private balcony. The adjoining bathroom featured a soaking tub positioned beneath a window overlooking the gardens, a separate shower big enough for 3 people, and dual vanities with lighting that Carla assured me was perfect for applying makeup, no matter your age. The closet, however, was what truly took my breath away, a room larger than my current bedroom, with custom shelving, hanging spaces at various heights, a center island with drawers, and even a small seating area with a full-length mirror. This is excessive, I murmured, unable to imagine owning enough clothes to fill even a quarter of the space. Carla laughed softly. You'd be surprised how quickly these fill up. And there's something wonderful about having enough space that you can actually see all your options when you're getting dressed. No more digging through crowded racks or stacked boxes. We continued the tour through 3 more bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, a formal dining room, a library with built-in shelves, a home office, a sunroom, and finally, the backyard with its terraced gardens, pool, and charming pool house that Carla suggested could be converted to a guest cottage. The property is just under an acre, she said as we stood on the stone patio, which is substantial for this area. There's a privacy fence around the entire perimeter, mature landscaping to block views from neighboring properties, and the security system was upgraded last year. She turned to me, her expression serious but kind. I know this is all overwhelming, Mrs. Winters, but I have to tell you, properties like this don't come on the market often in this area. If you're interested, I would recommend moving quickly. I looked back at the house, gracious, beautiful, far grander than anything I'd ever imagined owning. Could I be happy here? Could I make this my home? What's the asking price? I finally asked, though I knew it hardly mattered now. For $0.7 million, Carla answered without hesitation, which, for this neighborhood and a property of this caliber, is actually quite reasonable. The owners are motivated to sell quickly because of their relocation. $4.7 million. For a house. Just one house. The number was so far beyond my previous reality that it didn't even register as shocking anymore. It was like hearing about the distance to a far planet, intellectually comprehensible but emotionally abstract. I'll need to think about it, I said, falling back on the phrase I'd used so often in the past week when faced with decisions that felt too big, too consequential. Of course, Carla said smoothly. Take all the time you need. Just keep in mind that there are other interested parties. I can hold them off for perhaps 48 hours out of respect for Martin and his firm's relationship with the sellers, but after that. She let the sentence hang, the implication clear. This opportunity, like so many that had suddenly appeared in my life, had an expiration date. As we walked back through the house toward the front door, I found myself lingering in each room, trying to picture my few possessions scattered among these grand spaces. My faded armchair in that sunny corner. Frank's old record player on that built-in shelf. The quilt my grandmother made on the foot of that enormous bed. I'll take it, I said suddenly, the words surprising me as much as they seemed to surprise Carla and Martin, who had been quietly discussing something near the entryway. You will. Carla's professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine delight. That's wonderful, Mrs. Winters. You won't regret it. This house is going to be perfect for you. We'll need to move quickly on the paperwork, Martin said, already shifting into action mode. I assume you'll want a standard inspection, though given the recent renovations, I don't anticipate any issues. And of course, we'll want to review the Homeowners Association documents, though in this neighborhood, they tend to be quite reasonable. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I had just agreed to spend more money on a house than I had earned in my entire working life. And yet, it felt right. This house, with its warmth and character beneath the luxury, felt like somewhere I could belong. Somewhere I could begin again. Can we close quickly? I asked, another surprise. I'd like to move in as soon as possible. The hotel suite, for all its comfort, was beginning to feel like a gilded cage. I needed a home, a sanctuary of my own. With a cash offer, we can absolutely expedite the process, Carla assured me. Assuming no unexpected issues arise, you could be moving in within 2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks. A lifetime. A heartbeat. Another surreal marker in the new timeline of my life, before the lottery and after the lottery. Before Rebecca's cruelty and after Rebecca's cruelty. Before wealth and after wealth. As we left the house that would soon be mine, I took one last look over my shoulder at its elegant facade, its welcoming front porch, its mature trees offering shade and privacy. Not a mansion, not a showpiece, but a home. A real home for the woman I was becoming, not the woman I had been forced to be by circumstance. In the car, as Martin made calls to set the purchase in motion, I finally checked my phone. 27 missed calls. 15 voicemails. 42 text messages. Most from Rebecca, but not all. One name caught my eye, Jason Winters. My son-in-law. Rebecca's husband. He had called 3 times in the past hour, something he had never done before. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time Jason had called me directly. He was always in the background of my rare conversations with Rebecca, a distant voice offering perfunctory greetings, nothing more. Curious, and perhaps a bit alarmed, I listened to his voicemail. Eleanor, this is Jason. I need to speak with you urgently about Rebecca. She's not well. Please call me back as soon as you get this. It's important. It's about the children, too. His voice was tense, controlled, but with an undercurrent of something that might have been fear or anger. I couldn't tell which. Not well? What did that mean? Was Rebecca sick? Injured? Or was this another manipulation? A new tactic since her own calls had gone unanswered? I stared at the phone, conflicted. If Rebecca was truly ill, if the children were somehow at risk, I couldn't ignore that. Whatever had happened between us, she was still my daughter, and those children, distant as they were from me, were still my flesh and blood. But the timing was suspicious. The mention of the children, calculated to tug at my heartstrings. The vagueness that forced me to call back if I wanted details. Problem? Martin asked, noticing my expression. I'm not sure, I said slowly. My son-in-law called. Says Rebecca is not well, and that I need to call him urgently. Also mentioned the children. Martin's expression shifted subtly, a wariness entering his eyes. I see. And this is unusual behavior for him. Very. We barely speak. Even when I visit. I hesitated, then admitted the thought that had immediately crossed my mind. It feels like a trap. A new approach since Rebecca's calls haven't worked. It could be, Martin agreed, his tone neutral. Or there could be a genuine situation. Either way, I would advise caution. Meaning that if you decide to return the call, you should be prepared for various scenarios. He may try to pressure you about financial support. He may try to make you feel guilty for not responding to Rebecca. He may even try to threaten legal action of some kind, though I assure you, any such threats would be baseless. I hadn't even considered legal action. What kind of legal action could they possibly take? None that would succeed, Martin said firmly. But people in desperate situations sometimes make desperate claims. I've seen lottery winners sued by distant relatives claiming they'd made promises of support, by former friends alleging they'd had verbal agreements to share winnings, even by churches arguing the winner had pledged certain amounts in future donations.
He shook his head.
None of those suits prevailed, but they caused stress and negative publicity for the winners. The idea that Rebecca and Jason might actually sue me, their own mother and mother-in-law, was so outlandish it momentarily left me speechless. But then, a week ago, I would have said it was outlandish that my own daughter would tell me to die in silence, so perhaps I shouldn't be surprised by anything anymore. What should I do? I asked, hating how lost I sounded. Martin considered for a moment. If you want to know what's happening without directly engaging, we could have someone check on the situation discreetly. The security firm we've retained has investigators who could verify whether there's any truth to claims of illness or problems with the children. You mean spy on them? The concept was both shocking and tempting. Not spy, exactly. Just verify facts before you potentially put yourself in a difficult position. It's a standard precaution for high-profile individuals when dealing with suspicious contacts. High-profile individuals. There was that phrase again, that new category I supposedly belong to now. I wasn't sure how I felt about having people investigated, but I was even less sure about calling Jason back blindly. Let's do that, I decided. Have someone check if there's really an emergency. If there is, I'll deal with it. If not, I trailed off, not entirely sure what I would do if this proved to be yet another manipulation. Martin nodded and made another call, speaking in low, professional tones to someone at the security firm. When he hung up, he assured me they would have preliminary information within hours. In the meantime, he said, I suggest you focus on positive developments. You've just purchased a beautiful new home. That's something to celebrate, not to have overshadowed by family drama. He was right, of course. I shouldn't let Rebecca and Jason's machinations, if that's what this was, steal the joy of this moment. I had bought a house. My house. A place where I could build a new life, on my terms. You're right, I said, straightening my shoulders. In fact, I think I'd like to start shopping for furniture this afternoon. My apartment things won't exactly fill that space. Martin smiled, clearly pleased by my shift in focus. An excellent idea. I know several interior designers who would be delighted to assist you. No designers, I said quickly. Not yet, anyway. I want to choose some things myself first. Key pieces that matter to me. I needed to put my own stamp on the house before letting professionals take over, needed to ensure it reflected Eleanor Winters, not just a generic wealthy woman. Even better, Martin approved. There are several high-end furniture galleries in the design district. Shall we head there now? I nodded, deliberately putting my phone away without responding to Jason's message. Whatever crisis he was claiming could wait a few hours. For now, I would focus on building my new life, not managing the wreckage of my old one. The furniture galleries were another world entirely, hushed, elegant spaces where everything was curated, rather than simply displayed, where prices were discreetly absent from tags, where salespeople assessed my worth based on my clothes and accessories before deciding how much attention to give me. In the first gallery, dressed in my new but still relatively conservative outfit, I was largely ignored until Martin quietly mentioned to a hovering manager that we were furnishing a substantial residence in Oak Hill, apparently the prestigious neighborhood where my new house was located. Suddenly, I became visible, worthy of the manager's personal attention and offers of espresso or champagne. The experience left a bad taste in my mouth. "Let's try somewhere else," I said to Martin as we left, having thanked the manager politely but purchased nothing. The second gallery was a different experience entirely. The owner, a woman named Greta, with silver hair and a stylish bob and spectacles on a chain around her neck, approached us herself as soon as we entered. "Welcome," she said warmly, extending her hand first to me, then to Martin.
I'm Greta Halmberg.
"This is my gallery. Are you looking for anything in particular today, or just browsing our collection?" Her direct, unpretentious manner was refreshing after the first gallery's obsequiousness. "I've just bought a house," I explained. "I need to furnish it, but I'm not entirely sure where to start." "A new house is exciting," Greta said with genuine enthusiasm. "Tell me about it, not just the measurements and room count, but how it feels to you. What drew you to it?" For the next few minutes, I found myself describing not just the physical attributes of the house, but the emotions it had evoked. The sense of warmth despite its size, the way light filled the rooms, the feeling of both elegance and comfort it projected. Greta listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "You've painted a lovely picture," she said when I finished. "I think I understand what you're looking for. Pieces with presence, but also soul. Furniture that tells a story, not just fills space." She glanced at Martin. "Will your husband be involved in the selections as well?" I laughed, startled by the assumption. "Oh, Martin isn't my husband. He's my attorney. And friend," Martin added smoothly, seemingly unperturbed by the misunderstanding. "I'm just here to provide moral support. The decisions are entirely Mrs. Winters." "Well then, Mrs. Winters," Greta said, turning back to me, "shall we start exploring? I think I have several pieces that might speak to you." For the next 2 hours, Greta guided me through her gallery, showing me furniture that ranged from antique to contemporary, explaining the craftsmanship behind each piece, the woods used, the design philosophies. Unlike the first gallery, where the emphasis had been on brands and exclusivity, here the focus was on quality, beauty, and function. I fell in love with a dining table made from a single slab of walnut, its natural edges left intact, its surface polished to a soft glow. I chose a sectional sofa for the family room in buttersoft leather the color of cognac, deep enough to curl up on with a book. For the master bedroom, I selected a sleigh bed in cherry wood with simple, elegant lines that reminded me, in an elevated way, of the bed Frank and I had saved for months to buy when we were first married. By the time we finished, I had purchased enough key pieces to anchor each major room in the house, with Greta promising to arrange delivery as soon as the closing was complete. "The rest will come in time," she assured me as we finalized the substantial order. A home evolves. The important pieces are in place now. The details will follow as you live in the space and understand what you need. As we left the gallery, I felt lighter than I had in days, perhaps even years. The act of choosing beautiful things for my new home, not out of desperate necessity, but from genuine preference, had been unexpectedly healing. For so long, my purchases had been dictated by budget, by practicality, by making do. To select something simply, because it brought me joy, was a forgotten pleasure. "You look happy," Martin observed as we walked to the car. "I am," I realized, somewhat surprised by the admission. "I think this is the first time since the lottery that I've actually enjoyed spending the money." "That's because you're spending it on creating a home, not just acquiring possessions," he said perceptively. "There's a difference." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered, his expression turning serious as he listened to the caller. "I see," he said after a moment. "Yes, that's very interesting. Thank you for being thorough. We'll discuss next steps." He hung up and turned to me, his face carefully neutral. "That was the investigator from the security firm. They've looked into the situation with your daughter and son-in-law." My brief happiness evaporated, replaced by a familiar knot of anxiety. "And? Is Rebecca ill? Are the children all right?" "Rebecca appears to be perfectly healthy," Martin said dryly. "She was observed leaving a spa less than an hour ago, after what the receptionist described as a full-day package. The children are also fine. They were picked up from their private school by their regular nanny and taken to their soccer practice. Relief that they were safe quickly gave way to anger at the deception.
So Jason lied.
There's no emergency. Not of a medical nature, no, Martin agreed. But there may be other issues at play. The investigator also discovered that their home has a foreclosure notice filed against it. Apparently, they've missed several mortgage payments. And there's a repossession warning on Jason's car. I stared at him, processing this new information. They're in financial trouble. Significant financial trouble, from the look of it, Martin confirmed. Which may explain the sudden desperation to reconnect with you. Financial trouble. The phrase echoed in my mind, bringing with it complicated emotions. On one hand, I felt a surge of vindication. So Rebecca and Jason's perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. On the other hand, a mother's instinct to protect, to help, stirred uneasily. And beneath both of those reactions lay a question. Why hadn't they told me? Why the pretense about illness rather than simply asking for help directly? But I knew the answer to that.
Pride.
The same pride that had led Rebecca to keep me at arm's length all these years, to present a facade of flawless success, to reject any suggestion that she might need her mother for anything. And now that she did need me, or rather, needed my money, she couldn't bring herself to admit the real reason. What should I do? I asked Martin, genuinely uncertain. That depends entirely on what you want the outcome to be, he said carefully. If you wish to help them financially, we can arrange that in various ways: gifts, loans, paying off specific debts. If you don't wish to get involved, that's also your prerogative. Your lottery winnings don't create any legal obligation to assist family members, despite what they might believe. What did I want? The question was deceptively simple, yet profoundly difficult. Did I want to help the daughter who had wounded me so deeply? Did I want to save her from the consequences of whatever financial decisions had led to this crisis? Did I want to use my new wealth as a bridge to rebuild our relationship, or as a shield to protect myself from further hurt? I need to think, I said finally. And I need to talk to Jason, find out what's really happening. But I want to do it on my terms, not theirs. Martin nodded approvingly. A wise approach. Would you like to arrange a meeting at my office? Neutral territory, with me present to ensure the conversation remains productive. The thought of facing Jason and possibly Rebecca, with Martin beside me, was comforting. But something in me rebelled against the formality of it, the implied adversarial nature of a meeting in a lawyer's office. No, I decided. I'll meet with them at the hotel, in my suite. My territory, not neutral ground. A subtle but important distinction. But I'd like you to be nearby, perhaps in the adjoining room of the suite, where you can intervene if necessary. I think that can be arranged, Martin said. When would you like this meeting to take place? I considered. Part of me wanted to delay, to take more time to process my feelings, to decide exactly what I was willing to offer and what I would refuse. But another part, the part that had spent decades making do, solving problems, facing challenges head-on, wanted to rip off the bandage quickly. Tomorrow, I said decisively. Late morning. Martin raised an eyebrow but didn't question my choice. I'll have my assistant clear my schedule. Shall I arrange for Jason to be contacted, or would you prefer to do that yourself? I'll do it, I said. This, too, felt important, that I initiate the contact, that I set the terms from the beginning. When we reached the car, I finally took out my phone and called Jason back. He answered on the first ring, his voice taut with either genuine concern or well-practiced pretense. Eleanor, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I understand Rebecca is unwell, I said, keeping my voice neutral, and that there's some issue with the children. Yes, it's complicated, he said, a slight hesitation betraying him. Not something I can explain fully over the phone. We need to meet, to talk in person. I agree, I said calmly. I'll see you at my hotel tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Grand Hotel, penthouse suite. You can bring Rebecca, if she's feeling up to it. There was a pause, as if my easy acquiescence had thrown him off balance. Tomorrow at 11, he repeated. Yes, that works. Thank you, Eleanor. This means a lot to us, to the family. Family. There was that word again, wielded like a weapon disguised as an embrace. We'll talk tomorrow, I said, not acknowledging his gratitude. Goodbye, Jason. I hung up before he could respond, before he could try to extract any promises or commitments from me. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, a conversation that would likely change the course of my relationship with my daughter forever. For better or worse remained to be seen. I barely slept that night. My mind raced with scenarios, with questions, with alternate versions of the coming confrontation. What would Rebecca say? Would she apologize for her cruel words, or pretend they'd never happened? Would she admit their financial troubles, or maintain the fiction of some other crisis? Would she come alone, or bring the children as emotional leverage? And more importantly, what would I say? What would I offer? What would I demand in return? By dawn, I was exhausted but resolved. I knew what I wanted from this meeting, what I was prepared to give, and what I would not tolerate. As the morning light filtered through the hotel's suite's curtains, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened today, I would face it on my terms, not as the desperate mother seeking approval, but as a woman of means making conscious choices about her relationships. I dressed with particular care, not in the conservative clothes I'd worn to business meetings with Martin, but in a dress I'd purchased during a rare shopping excursion with Margie years ago. It was emerald green, simple but flattering, and I'd saved it for special occasions that never seemed to materialize. The last time I'd worn it had been at a Christmas party 3 years earlier, where Rebecca had looked me up and down and said, with faint surprise, "That's actually quite nice on you, Mom." Faint praise, but I'd treasured it nonetheless. Pathetic, how I'd hoarded such meager crumbs of her approval. At precisely 10:50, the hotel phone rang. The front desk, informing me that Mr. and Mrs. Winters had arrived and were being escorted up. No mention of children, I noted. So they'd decided against that particular strategy. Martin, who had arrived earlier and settled in the adjoining room of the suite with the door cracked open, caught my eye as I replaced the receiver. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "As I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing my dress and taking a deep breath. The knock came at 11 o'clock exactly. I opened the door to find Rebecca and Jason standing side by side, a united front. Rebecca looked immaculate as always, designer jeans, cashmere sweater, hair and makeup perfect. But there was a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. Jason, tall and conventionally handsome in the bland way of men who peaked in college, wore an expression of grave concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom," Rebecca said, stepping forward to embrace me as if our last conversation had never happened. "Thank you for seeing us." I accepted the hug stiffly, not returning it, but not pushing her away either. "Come in," I said, stepping back to allow them into the suite. Their eyes widened slightly as they took in the luxurious space, the panoramic views, the elegant furnishings, the discreet evidence of wealth that the hotel staff created with fresh flowers and gourmet treats. This was their first glimpse of my new reality, and I watched them absorb it, recalibrating their approach. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the seating area. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Nothing for me, thanks," Rebecca said, settling onto the sofa and arranging herself carefully, like an actress taking her mark. Jason sat beside her, their shoulders touching in a show of solidarity. I took the armchair across from them, hands folded in my lap, waiting. Let them speak first, I had decided. Let them reveal their hand before I showed mine. "Mom," Rebecca began, her voice gentle, practiced.
"We've been so worried about you.
After the lottery win was announced, with all those reporters and the chaos, we've been trying to reach you for days." "I know," I said simply. "I got your messages." A flicker of something annoyance? Frustration crossed her face before the concerned expression returned. "We didn't know where you were, if you were safe. The news said people were camping outside your apartment. It was frightening not being able to reach you." "I was perfectly safe," I assured her. "I had professional assistance immediately after the news broke. Legal counsel, security, everything I needed." That's good," she said, seemingly thrown by my calm demeanor. "We just wanted to make sure you weren't being taken advantage of. These situations can be overwhelming, especially for someone." She hesitated. "Someone my age?" I supplied. "Someone without experience managing large sums of money." "Well, yes," she admitted. "It's a lot to handle, Mom. We were concerned." "That's very kind," I said, my voice neutral. "But as you can see, I'm managing quite well. Now, Jason mentioned on the phone that you are unwell. I'm glad to see you looking so healthy today." Rebecca's eyes darted to Jason, a quick, accusatory glance. Yes, I was feeling under the weather yesterday. Nothing serious. Serious enough for Jason to call me multiple times, expressing urgent concern about both you and the children, I pointed out. He seemed quite distressed. Jason cleared his throat, jumping in to rescue his wife from the corner she was painting herself into. "What I meant was that Rebecca has been under tremendous stress lately. Emotional strain really from worrying about you and from other issues we've been dealing with as a family." "What kind of issues?" I asked directly, tired of the dance. Rebecca and Jason exchanged glances again, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Rebecca sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "We're having some financial difficulties," she admitted, her voice smaller now, less controlled. "Temporary setbacks, nothing we can't overcome, but challenging at the moment." "I see," I said, not offering immediate sympathy or assistance. "What kind of financial difficulties?" Another exchange of glances. Jason took over. "My company downsized 6 months ago. I was let go, along with about 30% of the staff. I've been consulting while looking for a new position, but the income is irregular and with the children's school tuition, the mortgage, car payments." He spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "We've fallen behind on some obligations. The foreclosure notice on your house," I said. "The repossession warning on your car." Their faces registered shock. Rebecca recovered first. "How did you?" "That's not important," I interrupted. "What's important is that you didn't tell me any of this. Instead, you created a fictional emergency to get me to talk to you." "Mom, it wasn't like that," Rebecca protested. "We were going to tell you everything today in person. It just seemed complicated to explain over the phone." "Not as complicated as pretending you were ill," I pointed out. "Not as complicated as using my grandchildren as emotional leverage." Rebecca flushed, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since she arrived. "That's not fair. The children do miss you. They do ask about you." "When was the last time you brought them to visit me?" I asked. "When was the last time you invited me to one of their school events, or birthday parties, or soccer games? When was the last time you called me just to chat, not because you needed something?" She had no answer for that, her flush deepening. "And let's not forget our last conversation before the lottery," I continued, my voice steady despite the pain the memory still evoked. "When you told me to stop calling you. When you told me to, and I quote, just die in silence." Jason's head whipped toward Rebecca, genuine surprise on his face. "You said that to your mother?" So he hadn't known. "Interesting." "I was stressed," Rebecca said defensively. "I didn't mean it literally. Mom knows that." "No, Rebecca, I don't know that," I said quietly. "Because those words came from somewhere. They weren't invented out of thin air. They reflected how you truly feel about me, about my place in your life. And now, suddenly, when I have something you need, you're here, concerned about my welfare, missing me, wanting to be a family again." Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. Whether genuine or another performance, I couldn't tell anymore. "That's not true, Mom. Yes, we need help right now, but that's not the only reason we're here.
I was wrong to say those things to you.
I was horrible.
I'm sorry.
I've been under so much pressure, trying to keep up appearances, trying not to let anyone know how bad things have gotten." "Including me," I said. "Your own mother. The one person who would never have judged you for struggling, who would have helped in any way I could, even before the lottery." "Would you have," she challenged, a flash of the old Rebecca breaking through. "Would you really have been able to help with a mortgage payment of $9,000? With private school tuition of $30,000 per child? With the kind of expenses we have. Her words hung in the air, revealing more than she'd intended about the gulf between our worlds, about how she saw me. Not just as emotionally inadequate, but as financially irrelevant. Too small to matter. Too limited to be of use. No, I admitted finally. I couldn't have helped with those specific expenses. But I would have offered whatever I could. A place to stay if you lost your house. My savings, meager as they were, if it meant keeping my grandchildren in school. My time, my love, my support. Those things have value too, Rebecca. Or they used to, before money became the only currency that mattered to you. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair, she whispered. Isn't it? I asked. Then why are you here now when I have money, when I can write a check that solves your problems? Why weren't you here a month ago, or a year ago, or 5 years ago, when all I had to offer was love? Jason intervened, his voice placating. Eleanor, please. We've all made mistakes. Said things we regret. Done things we wish we could take back. But we're family. Surely that counts for something. Family. That word again, like a spell they thought would unlock my heart and my wallet. Yes, I said slowly. Family does count for something. Which is why I'm going to help you. Hope bloomed on their faces, so naked, so immediate that it confirmed every suspicion I'd had about their motives. I'll pay off the foreclosure notice, I continued. I'll clear the car loan. I'll ensure the children's tuition is covered through high school graduation. Relief replaced hope, their shoulders sagging as the weight of financial ruin lifted from them. Rebecca reached for my hand. Mom, thank you.
I don't know what to say.
This is... I'm not finished, I said, gently but firmly withdrawing my hand from hers. There are conditions. The relief faltered, uncertainty creeping back into their expressions. First, these payments will be made directly to the institutions involved, the mortgage company, the auto lender, the school.
Not to you.
Jason nodded quickly. That's fine, of course. Whatever works best. Second, this is not a blank check for your lifestyle. I'm preventing a crisis, not funding a certain standard of living. If you want to maintain your current lifestyle, Jason needs to find appropriate employment, or you'll need to make adjustments. This condition was clearly less welcome, but they nodded again, having little choice. Third, and most importantly, I continued, my voice softening slightly, I want a real relationship with my grandchildren. Not orchestrated visits when you need something, not holiday appearances, but genuine involvement in their lives. I want to attend their games and recitals. I want regular visits at my new home once I move in. I want to be their grandmother, not a stranger who happens to share DNA. Rebecca's expression was complex, relief mixed with resentment, gratitude tangled with shame. Of course, she said finally. They'd love that, Mom. They really would. Whether she meant it or was simply agreeing to secure the financial help, I couldn't tell. Only time would reveal that truth. There's one more thing, I said, standing up to signal that our meeting was drawing to a close. I need you to understand something fundamental, Rebecca. Something that's changed and will never go back to how it was. She looked up at me, wary but attentive. I will always love you because you're my daughter. That hasn't changed and never will. But I no longer need your approval. I no longer need you to validate my worth as a person, as a mother, as a woman. That chapter of our relationship is over. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she'd never considered that I might have sought her approval, that I might have measured my worth by her regard. From now on, I continued, we will build a new relationship based on mutual respect, or we won't have one at all. I won't be your ATM, your emergency fund, or your safety net without also being your mother in every sense of the word. Those days are over. Rebecca stood as well, Jason following suit. Her expression was subdued, thoughtful in a way I hadn't seen in years. I understand, she said quietly. And Mom, I really am sorry. For what I said. For how I've treated you. For everything. It was the first moment in our entire conversation that felt completely genuine, unmarred by calculation or performance. For that brief instant, I glimpsed the daughter I remembered, the one who had once loved me unconditionally, before adult concerns and status anxiety had hardened her heart. "I know," I said gently, "and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean continuing patterns that hurt us both. We start fresh from here, or we don't start at all." She nodded, tears spilling now that seemed finally real. "Fresh start," she agreed, her voice thick. "I'd like that." As they prepared to leave, Jason hanging back awkwardly while Rebecca gathered her composure, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, cautious hope for what might be rebuilt, and underneath it all, a profound sense of having reclaimed something essential: my dignity, my autonomy, my right to set boundaries even with those I loved most. At the door, Rebecca turned back, hesitating. "When can we see your new house? When can the kids visit?" "Soon," I promised. "I close in a few weeks. Once I'm settled, you'll all be my first guests." She smiled, a small, tentative thing but genuine. "We'll look forward to it." After they left, Martin emerged from the adjoining room, his expression carefully neutral. "That went interestingly," he observed. Yes, I agreed, suddenly exhausted by the emotional confrontation. "Do you think they meant it? The apologies, the promises?" Martin considered before answering. "I think they meant it in this moment," he said finally. "Whether that meaning persists when the immediate crisis is past, when the reality of your new boundaries sinks in, that remains to be seen." It was a lawyer's answer, measured and noncommittal. But it was also, I suspected, the truth. People in crisis promised many things. Only time would reveal which promises had substance and which were merely words spoken in desperation. "Well," I said, sinking back into my chair, "I guess we'll find out." "Indeed we will," Martin agreed. "And in the meantime, we'll make sure those financial arrangements are structured properly, with clear documentation and conditions. Just in case. Just in case. Because while I might hope for the best for my daughter, while I might give her the chance to rebuild what she had broken, I was no longer naive enough to leave myself vulnerable to further hurt." The Eleanor who had answered Rebecca's call a week ago, hoping to share good news about a part-time job, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned, painfully but irreversibly, that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was surrender. And I was done surrendering. Done apologizing for existing. Done accepting crumbs when I deserved a feast. As Martin made calls to set the financial arrangements in motion, I stood at the window of my suite, looking out at the city that had always been my home but which now seemed full of new possibilities, new horizons. Somewhere out there was my new house, waiting for me to fill it with beautiful things, with new memories, with whatever future I chose to create. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that future felt like mine to shape, not merely to endure. Then my phone rang again. An unfamiliar number with the local area code. Probably another reporter, another distant acquaintance suddenly remembering my existence, another charity seeking a donation. I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or the lingering emotional vulnerability of the morning, made me pick up. "Hello? Mrs. Winters?" A man's voice, vaguely familiar, but not immediately placeable. "This is Detective James Porter with the Metro Police Department. We met briefly a few years ago when your apartment building had that break-in." "Yes, Detective, I remember," I said, confusion replacing my earlier weariness. "What can I do for you?" His next words froze the blood in my veins. "Mrs. Winters, I'm afraid there's been an incident involving your son-in-law, Jason. He's been arrested, and he's claiming that you're responsible." "Arrested? Jason?" I sank into the nearest chair, my knees suddenly weak. "What do you mean he's claiming I'm responsible?" If you're still with me on this wild ride, hit subscribe now. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do by someone you tried to help? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. "Mrs. Winters, I'd rather not discuss the details over the phone," Detective Porter said, his voice professionally neutral. "Would you be able to come down to the station this afternoon? Say around 3 o'clock. Martin, who had been watching my face with increasing concern, moved closer. "Who is it?" he mouthed. I covered the phone.
Police.
Jason's been arrested and is somehow blaming me. Martin's eyebrows shot up, and he immediately held out his hand for the phone. Let me speak with them. I hesitated only briefly before handing it over. This was exactly why I'd been fortunate enough to have legal counsel from the beginning, for situations I could never have anticipated. This is Martin Chun, Mrs. Winter's attorney, he said crisply. With whom am I speaking? He listened for a moment. I see, Detective Porter. And what exactly is the nature of these allegations against my client? Another pause. I understand you prefer to discuss this in person, but I'll need some basic information before I allow my client to come to the station. His voice took on a steely edge I hadn't heard before. Yes, allow is the word I used, Detective. Mrs. Winters will not be speaking with you or anyone else at the department without proper preparation and my presence. I watched as Martin transformed before my eyes from the gentle, supportive advisor I'd come to depend on into a formidable legal shield. His entire demeanor changed, his stance widened, his shoulders squared, his voice dropped to a lower, more authoritative register. 3 o'clock will not be possible, he continued. We have prior commitments that cannot be rescheduled. Tomorrow morning at 10 would work for us. He listened again. No, Detective, I'm afraid that's non-negotiable. If Mr. Winters is making accusations against my client, we need time to understand the nature of those accusations and prepare accordingly. One final pause. Excellent. We'll see you tomorrow at 10. And, Detective, I expect full transparency when we arrive. Good day. He ended the call and handed the phone back to me, his expression grave. What's happening? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What could Jason possibly be accusing me of? Martin sat down across from me, his movements deliberate. The detective wouldn't give specifics, but he indicated that Jason is claiming you threatened him in some way during your meeting today, that you made statements that could be construed as extortion. Extortion. I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. That's ridiculous. I offered to help them, to pay their debts. How is that extortion? It isn't, Martin assured me, which is why I've bought us time to prepare. We need to document exactly what was said in that meeting, what offers were made, what conditions were attached. It will be your word against theirs, so we need to be precise. But you were here, I pointed out. You heard everything. I did, he acknowledged, and I'll provide a statement to that effect. But Jason and Rebecca may claim they didn't know I was listening, that it was some kind of entrapment. We need to be prepared for any angle they might take. My head was spinning. Less than an hour ago, I thought we'd reached a fragile understanding, a starting point for rebuilding our relationship. Now Jason was at a police station, accusing me of crimes I hadn't committed. Why would he do this? I asked, more to myself than to Martin. Why, after I agreed to help them? Martin's expression was carefully controlled, but I saw a flicker of something, anger, perhaps, or disgust, cross his face. There could be several reasons. He may have felt humiliated by having to ask for help. He may have wanted more than you offered. Or he hesitated. Or what? Or this could be a different kind of strategy. A way to pressure you into giving them more money, more control, more freedom, with fewer conditions. Some people see lawsuits, or the threat of criminal charges, as leverage. Blackmail, I said flatly. You're saying he might be trying to blackmail me? It's a possibility we have to consider, Martin said. Especially given the timing, immediately after leaving here, before any of the financial arrangements we discussed could be put into place. I felt sick. Not just at the accusation, at the legal jeopardy Jason might have placed me in, but at what this revealed about him, about them. Had Rebecca known? Had she been part of this plan? Had their entire visit, her tearful apology, been nothing but an elaborate setup? What do we do now? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. First, we document everything from the meeting while it's fresh in your mind, Martin said, his tone shifting from grim to professionally efficient. Then we contact the security team to see if we can get footage from the hotel lobby and elevator showing Jason and Rebecca's demeanor before and after meeting with you. That could be telling. We should also reach out to your daughter, see what she knows about this.
He paused.
And we need to ensure you have proper security in place immediately. If they're willing to go this far, we need to be prepared for other actions. Security. I never imagined needing protection from my own family. The thought made my chest tighten, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. Eleanor, Martin said, using my first name for the first time, his voice gentler now. This is upsetting, I know, but I promise you we'll handle it. You've done nothing wrong. We just need to be methodical in proving that. I nodded, trying to calm my breathing. Okay, where do we start? For the next 2 hours, we worked systematically. I recounted the entire meeting with Rebecca and Jason, while Martin took detailed notes. We created a timeline of events, from Jason's first call claiming Rebecca was ill through their departure from the hotel. Martin had his assistant bring recording equipment, and I made a formal statement about the meeting, the offers I'd made, the conditions I'd set. This is good, Martin said when we finished. Your recollection is clear and specific. The conditions you set, direct payments to institutions rather than to them, expecting Jason to find employment, those aren't extortion. They're reasonable boundaries any financial advisor would recommend. Will the police see it that way? I asked. Once they have all the facts, yes, he assured me. But we need to be prepared for Jason to twist the narrative, to claim you said things you didn't, to paint himself as the victim. The victim. The irony was almost too much to bear. For years, I'd been the one scraping by, working multiple jobs, living in a tiny apartment, while Rebecca and Jason enjoyed their big house, private schools for the children, luxury cars. Now that I had the means to help them, help I'd offered freely if with conditions they were trying to paint me as some kind of criminal. I don't understand people anymore, I said quietly. I don't understand my own daughter. Martin's expression softened. People can surprise you, for better or worse, when money enters the equation. I've seen families tore apart by much smaller amounts than what you've won. He hesitated, then added, but I've also seen relationships heal when both parties approach the situation with honesty and good faith. Don't give up on Rebecca entirely yet. She may not know what Jason is doing. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that my daughter, for all her flaws, wouldn't be party to such a scheme. But the Rebecca I thought I knew would never have told me to die in silence either, so perhaps I didn't know her at all. Should I call her? I asked. Try to find out what she knows? Martin considered this. Not yet. Let's wait until we have more information from the police tomorrow. If she's involved, calling her now might give them time to coordinate their stories. If she's not involved, Jason may be monitoring her phone, her communications. The implication that Jason might be controlling Rebecca's actions, her access, sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that possibility, that my daughter might be in a relationship that was more than just financially troubled. Do you think she's in danger? I asked, new worry blooming. I have no evidence of that, Martin said carefully. But in situations where one partner initiates legal action without the other's knowledge, especially actions that could impact family finances, it's something to consider. We'll make sure the security team keeps an eye on both of them for different reasons. By early evening, we had completed our documentation and preparation for the next day's meeting with Detective Porter. Martin insisted on staying for dinner, ordering room service, and continuing to discuss strategy as we ate. I picked at my food, appetite diminished by stress and uncertainty. You should try to eat something, Martin encouraged gently. Tomorrow will be challenging. You'll need your strength. I managed a few bites of the expensive salmon that tasted like cardboard in my anxious state. What do you think will happen? Worst case scenario. Martin set down his fork, considering. Worst case? Jason files a formal complaint. The district attorney decides to pursue charges, and we have to fight this in court. At my alarmed expression, he quickly added, but that's extremely unlikely, Eleanor. Once the police hear your side, see our documentation, understand the context, they'll recognize this for what it is. And what is it exactly? I asked. A desperate attempt at leverage by a man who's run out of options, Martin said flatly. Or possibly a preemptive strike. Preemptive? Against what? Against any conditions you might place on your financial assistance. By making you the one under scrutiny, he deflects attention from his own actions, his own failures. Martin's expression darkened. I've seen this tactic before. Attack first, create enough confusion and doubt that the other party is too busy defending themselves to hold you accountable. It made a twisted kind of sense. If I was worried about potential criminal charges, I might be more willing to simply give them money without conditions, without oversight, without questions about how they'd gotten into financial trouble in the first place. I won't be manipulated, I said, finding a spark of anger beneath my fear. I won't be bullied by my own son-in-law. Good, Martin approved. Hold on to that resolve. We'll need it tomorrow. After dinner, Martin reluctantly prepared to leave. I've arranged for security to be posted in the hallway outside your suite tonight, he informed me, just as a precaution. And I'll be here at 8 tomorrow morning so we can review everything once more before meeting with Detective Porter. At the door, he paused, his expression softening from professional to personal. Try to get some rest, Eleanor. This is one day, one challenge in what's going to be a long journey of adjusting to your new circumstances. We'll get through it. I repeated, suddenly aware of how much I'd come to depend on this man who had been a stranger just a week ago. He smiled slightly. Yes, we. That's what you're paying me for, after all. But we both knew it had become more than a professional relationship. Not romantic. I wasn't naive enough to imagine that, but something beyond the typical attorney-client dynamic. In the whirlwind of my new life, Martin Chun had become my anchor, my guide, my advocate in ways that went beyond legal representation. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. After he left, I moved through the suite like a ghost, turning off lights, drawing curtains, going through the motions of preparing for bed, though I knew sleep would be elusive. My phone had been mercifully quiet since Jason's arrest. No calls from Rebecca, no reporters who had somehow gotten my number, no lottery officials with new paperwork to sign. Just as I was about to turn off the final lamp, there was a soft knock at the door. Not the main door to the hallway, but the connecting door to the adjoining room that Martin had used earlier. Frowning, I approached it cautiously. Had he forgotten something? Yes. I called through the door. Mrs. Winters? Security. Mr. Chen asked me to check on you before I take up my post in the hallway. I hesitated. Martin hadn't mentioned sending security to check on me, but perhaps it was standard procedure. Still, caution seemed wise given the day's events. May I see some identification? I asked. A pause. Then, of course, I can slide it under the door. I waited, but nothing appeared in the gap beneath the door. My unease grew. Hello. I called again. No response. I backed away from the door, reaching for my phone to call the hotel's front desk. Before I could dial, my cell phone rang in my hand, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. Martin's name flashed on the screen. Martin? I answered immediately. Eleanor, are you all right? His voice was tense, urgent. Yes, I'm fine. Why? Security just reported someone trying to access the service elevator that leads to your floor, someone using a staff key card that was reported stolen earlier today. They're searching the hotel now, but I wanted to make sure you were safe. My blood ran cold as I stared at the connecting door. Martin, someone just knocked on my connecting door, claiming to be security sent by you. I didn't send anyone, he said sharply. The security team is stationed in the lobby and the main hallway. Is your door locked? Yes, both doors are locked, I assured him, double-checking the main door's deadbolt and chain. Good. Stay away from both doors. I'm on my way back now. I was just a few blocks away. Hotel security is being alerted to come to your suite immediately. Stay on the phone with me. I retreated to the bedroom, closing and locking that door as well, creating another barrier between myself and whoever might be trying to get in. Who would do this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason's in custody, isn't he? As far as we know, yes, Martin confirmed. But he could have accomplices. Or this could be unrelated, someone who knows about your lottery when trying to get access to you, to your money. The thought was terrifying. Until the lottery, I'd been invisible, just another aging woman working menial jobs, living in a modest apartment. existing on the periphery of other people's awareness. Now I was a target, vulnerable in ways I'd never had to consider before. "Stay with me," Martin urged when I had been silent too long. "Talk to me. Security is on their way up now." "I'm here," I managed. "Just processing." "I know. It's a lot. But you're not alone in this, Eleanor. Remember that. Not alone." The words were a lifeline in the rising tide of fear. For so many years, I had been alone, handling everything by myself, solving every problem, bearing every burden. The idea that I had people now, professionals, yes, but people nonetheless, who were invested in my safety, my well-being, was still foreign, still hard to fully trust. A sharp knock on the main door made me jump. "Mrs. Winters?" "Hotel security." "Are you all right?" I stayed silent, looking at my phone. "That should be them," Martin confirmed. "But don't open the door yet. Ask them to identify themselves fully." I approached the main door cautiously. "Please identify yourselves," I called. "This is Carlos Mendez, head of security for the Grand Hotel, with security officers Wilson and Taylor. We received a report of suspicious activity near your suite and are here to ensure your safety." I still hesitated. "How do I know you're really hotel security?" "Ma'am, I understand your caution," the man replied. "I can slide my hotel ID under the door if you wish. Or you can call the front desk and ask them to confirm we've been sent up." The second option seemed safer. "I'll call the desk," I decided. "Of course, ma'am. We'll wait right here." I used the hotel room phone to call the front desk, who immediately confirmed that Carlos Mendez and 2 officers had indeed been dispatched to my suite. Only then did I unlock the door, though I kept the security chain engaged, opening it just enough to see the 3 uniformed men standing in the hallway. "Mrs. Winters," the oldest of the 3 said, showing me an ID badge that matched the one on the hotel's website I'd just checked on my phone.
I'm Carlos Mendez.
"We've secured this floor and are conducting a thorough search of the hotel. May we check your suite and the connecting room to ensure no one has gained access?" I let them in, standing back as they methodically checked every room, every closet, even under the beds and behind the shower curtains. The connecting door to the adjoining room was still locked from my side, but Carlos used a master key to open it from the other side, revealing an empty room. "All clear," he reported after their search. "But we'd like to station an officer in your suite tonight, if that's acceptable. Just as a precaution." "Yes, please," I agreed immediately, relief making my voice shake slightly. Carlos nodded to the youngest of the 3 officers. "Officer Taylor will stay with you until Mr. Chen arrives, and then we'll discuss overnight arrangements." I thanked them, then returned to my phone call with Martin. "They've checked everything," I reported. "No one in the suite or the connecting room. They're leaving Officer Taylor here until you arrive." "Good," Martin said, audibly relieved. "I'm about 5 minutes away. Try to stay calm, Eleanor. The immediate danger, if there was any, has passed." But had it? Or was this just the beginning of a new kind of vulnerability, a new kind of fear that would shadow my life now that I had something people wanted, something people might hurt me to get? Martin arrived shortly after, bringing with him 2 men he introduced as private security specialists from the firm we'd hired. They spoke briefly with Officer Taylor and Carlos Mendez, then implemented what they called enhanced security protocols for my suite. One of the specialists, a former military man named Ramirez, would stay in the suite overnight, while the other, Collins, would monitor the hallway and elevator access. "This is my life now," I asked Martin when we had a moment alone. "Armed guards and security protocols?" "Temporarily," he assured me. "Once you're in your new home, with its security systems and private setting, things will normalize. And as media attention fades, as people forget you're a lottery winner, the risk will decrease. But not disappear entirely." That was the unspoken truth hanging between us. My life had changed fundamentally, irrevocably. Safety, privacy, normality, these were now luxuries to be purchased and maintained, not birthrights to be taken for granted. "Try to get some sleep," Martin advised, preparing to leave once the security arrangements were finalized. "Tomorrow will be challenging enough, without exhaustion complicating matters." I nodded, though I doubted sleep would come easily with a stranger stationed in my living room, no matter how professional or necessary his presence might be. "Will you be all right?" Martin asked, his concern evident. "I've survived worse," I said, attempting a smile that felt brittle on my lips. "At least this time I have help." He squeezed my hand briefly, the gesture unexpected but comforting. "Always, Eleanor. That's a promise." After he left, I retreated to the bedroom, closing the door to give myself at least the illusion of privacy. Sleep, as I'd predicted, proved elusive. I lay in the dark, mind racing with questions, with fears, with anger at how quickly my moment of triumph had turned into a nightmare of accusations and threats. What would happen tomorrow at the police station? What exactly was Jason accusing me of? Would Rebecca stand with him, turning against her own mother? Or was she perhaps as much a victim in this as I was, manipulated by a husband desperate to maintain his lifestyle, his control? And beneath these immediate concerns lay deeper questions, ones that had been forming since the moment I'd learned of my lottery win. Who was I now?
Who did I want to be?
How would this money, this power, change me? Would I let it make me hard, suspicious, isolated? Or could I find a way to use it that honored the woman I'd always been, while allowing me to become someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be used or discarded ever again? Dawn found me still awake, watching the sky lighten through a crack in the curtains, no closer to answers, but perhaps more resolved to face whatever came next with dignity, with clarity, with the quiet strength that had sustained me through decades of struggle. Martin arrived promptly at 8, bringing with him fresh coffee and pastries from a bakery I'd mentioned liking during one of our many conversations. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, remembering such a small detail amid all the chaos, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Not just for breakfast, but for everything. For coming back last night, for arranging security, for handling all of this with such care." "It's my job," he said simply, but his smile suggested it had become more than that for him as well. We spent the next hour reviewing our strategy for the meeting with Detective Porter. Martin had prepared a folder with our documented timeline, my statement about the meeting with Rebecca and Jason, and printouts of the hotel security footage showing them entering and leaving the hotel, their demeanor notably undistressed as they departed. "The key," Martin emphasized, "is to be calm, clear, and consistent. Don't let anger or hurt drive your responses, no matter what accusations are made. Just tell the truth, exactly as it happened." I nodded, steeling myself for what promised to be an ordeal. "And if they ask about the conditions I placed on helping Rebecca and Jason financially? Be transparent," Martin advised. "Those conditions, direct payments to institutions, expectations that Jason find employment, wanting a real relationship with your grandchildren, are reasonable and appropriate. There's nothing extortionate about them." At precisely 9:45, we left the hotel, escorted by Ramirez to a waiting car where Collins was already at the wheel. The security measures that had seemed excessive the night before now felt necessary, even comforting, as we made our way to the police station. Detective Porter met us in the lobby, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who had seen too much of human nature's darker side. He led us to an interview room, not an interrogation room with its intimidating connotations, a small courtesy that Martin acknowledged with a nod. "Mrs. Winters, Mr. Chin," Porter began once we were seated. "Thank you for coming in. As I mentioned on the phone, we're looking into some allegations made by Jason Winters following his arrest yesterday." "What exactly was he arrested for, Detective?" Martin asked before I could speak. That detail wasn't clear from our conversation. Porter's expression remained neutral. Mr. Winters was arrested for attempted fraud. Specifically, he attempted to withdraw a large sum of money from a joint account he shares with his wife using forged authorization documents. I blinked in surprise. This wasn't what I'd expected at all. Fraud? Against Rebecca? Not exactly, Porter said. The account in question is a trust account for their children's education. According to the bank manager who reported the incident, Mr. Winters attempted to withdraw nearly the entire balance, approximately $87,000, using documents he claimed were signed by both himself and Mrs. Winters as co-trustees. The bank manager recognized that Mrs. Winters' signature had been forged and contacted her to confirm. When she denied authorizing the withdrawal, the police were called. My mind raced to process this information. Jason had tried to empty their children's education fund? The very fund I just promised to replenish and maintain? When had this happened? When was this attempt made? Martin asked, echoing my thoughts. Yesterday afternoon, approximately 1:30 p.m., Porter replied. Shortly after, we believe, a meeting between Mr. and Mrs. Winters and Mrs. Eleanor Winters here. The timeline clicked into place. Jason had left my hotel suite around 12:30 after I'd promised to help with their financial troubles, including ensuring the children's tuition was covered. He'd gone directly to the bank to try to drain their education fund, using a forged signature from Rebecca. And my client's alleged involvement? Martin pressed. Porter opened a folder, consulting his notes. After his arrest, Mr. Winters claimed that Mrs. Eleanor Winters had essentially threatened him during their meeting earlier that day. He stated that she had offered financial assistance but attached manipulative and controlling conditions that would give her inappropriate influence over his family. He claimed he was merely trying to protect his children's interests by securing their education funds before Mrs. Winters could take control of them. I couldn't contain my reaction. That's absurd. I promised to pay their tuition directly to the school to ensure the children's education wouldn't be disrupted by their financial problems. How is that taking control? Martin placed a calming hand on my arm. Eleanor, let's proceed methodically. He turned back to Porter. Detective, my client had a meeting with her daughter and son-in-law yesterday morning, during which they revealed significant financial difficulties, including a foreclosure notice on their home. Mrs. Winters generously offered to resolve these immediate crises by paying off certain debts directly to the institutions involved, the mortgage company, auto lender, and the children's school. At no point did she threaten or attempt to control Mr. or Mrs. Winters. Porter nodded, his expression giving nothing away. And were there any conditions attached to this financial assistance? Yes, I said before Martin could answer. 3 conditions. First, that payments would go directly to the institutions, not to Rebecca and Jason personally. Second, that this wasn't an open-ended commitment to maintain their current lifestyle. Jason would need to find appropriate employment. And third, that I wanted a real relationship with my grandchildren, not just occasional visits when they needed something from me. I met Porter's gaze directly. Those weren't threats, detective. They were boundaries. After being told by my own daughter to die in silence, just days before winning the lottery, I felt some boundaries were necessary. Porter's eyebrows rose slightly at this. Mrs. Winters told you to die in silence. Yes, I confirmed, the pain of those words still fresh. During our last phone conversation before the lottery win, when she thought I was calling to ask for financial help, though I was actually calling to share good news about a job I'd gotten. Porter made a note, then looked back up at me. And Mr. Winters was present during your meeting yesterday? He heard these conditions directly? Yes, he and Rebecca came together. He did most of the talking about their financial situation, actually. And their reaction to your conditions? They seemed to accept them, I said, remembering their relief, their quick agreement. They certainly didn't express any objection or discomfort. Rebecca even apologized for her previous treatment of me, said she wanted a fresh start. Martin opened our folder, sliding across the documented timeline and my statement. We've prepared a detailed account of the meeting, detective. And we have security footage from the hotel showing Mr. and Mrs. Winters before and after the meeting. Their demeanor upon leaving gives no indication of feeling threatened or coerced. Porter accepted the documents, reviewing them briefly. This is helpful. Thank you. He closed his folder and leaned back slightly. Mrs. Winters, to be completely transparent with you, Mr. Winters' allegations seemed questionable from the start. His timing, attempting to withdraw funds immediately after meeting with you, before any of your promised assistance could materialize, suggested he was acting opportunistically, not defensively. Relief washed through me. So, you don't believe his accusations? Our job is to investigate claims, not immediately accept or reject them, Porter said diplomatically. But having heard your account, reviewed your documentation, and considering the circumstances of Mr. Winter's arrest, I believe we have a clearer picture of the situation. He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I don't anticipate any further action regarding his allegations against you. And, Jason, I couldn't help asking, what happens to him now? That will be up to the district attorney, Porter explained. Given the amount involved and the forged documents, he's facing serious charges. Whether those proceed will depend partly on whether Mrs. Rebecca Winters wishes to pursue them. Rebecca. I hadn't considered her position in all this. Would she stand by Jason, even after discovering he'd tried to drain their children's education fund? Would she believe his claims about me? Or would this be the breaking point for their relationship? Is Rebecca all right? I asked suddenly. Does she know about all of this? Porter's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Winters was notified of her husband's arrest yesterday. She seemed distressed but composed, from the officer's report. She did not post bail for Mr. Winters, who remains in custody. That last detail was telling. If Rebecca had chosen not to bail Jason out, perhaps she wasn't standing with him after all. Thank you, Detective, Martin said, rising and extending his hand. We appreciate your thoroughness and professionalism in handling this matter. As we prepared to leave, Porter added, Mrs. Winters, given your recent lottery win and the publicity surrounding it, I would advise continued caution. Unfortunately, sudden wealth can attract various forms of unwanted attention, from family members to strangers. We've implemented appropriate security measures, Martin assured him, and Mrs. Winters is relocating to a more secure property shortly. Outside the police station, I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as though a weight had been lifted. He didn't believe Jason, I said, still somewhat amazed by this turn of events. Because Jason's story didn't make sense, Martin pointed out as we walked to our waiting car. People who are truly being extorted or threatened don't immediately try to commit fraud. They report the threats, seek help, protect themselves legally. Jason did none of those things. He went straight to the bank and tried to grab money he wasn't entitled to. Using Rebecca's forged signature, I added, the implications of that act still sinking in. He was stealing from his own children, and potentially setting up a narrative where you were the villain, Martin agreed. If he'd succeeded in withdrawing that money, he could have claimed he was protecting it from your influence, maybe even disappeared with it. When you then paid the school directly as promised, he could have painted that as you trying to control them, just as he claimed. The calculation, the manipulation involved was staggering. Do you think Rebecca knew? Was she part of this plan? Martin considered as we settled into the car. The fact that she didn't bail him out suggests she wasn't. And the bank contacted her about the forged signature, which means she confirmed it wasn't hers. Those aren't the actions of a co-conspirator. I leaned back against the seat, emotionally drained by the morning's events. I should call her, make sure she and the children are all right. That would be kind, Martin agreed. But perhaps wait until we're back at the hotel. Give yourself a moment to process everything that's happened. The drive back was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Mine circled relentlessly around Rebecca, my daughter, now dealing with not just financial crisis, but a husband who had betrayed her trust, who had been willing to steal from their children's future. Whatever her flaws, whatever pain she had caused me, I couldn't help but worry for her now. Back in my suite, which felt bizarrely normal after the tension of the police station, I finally worked up the courage to call her. The phone rang several times, and I was preparing myself for voicemail when she answered, her voice small and subdued. Mom, Rebecca, I said, my carefully prepared speech evaporating at the sound of her voice. I heard about Jason. Are you all right? Are the children all right? A pause, then a sound that might have been a suppressed sob. You know? About the arrest? About what he did? Yes, I just came from the police station. Detective Porter told me everything. About Jason trying to withdraw the education fund money. About him blaming me somehow. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know, Mom. I swear, I didn't know he was going to do that. When the bank called me, asking if I'd sign those documents, I couldn't believe it. My own husband, forging my signature, trying to take our children's money. Are you safe? I asked the question that had been haunting me. You? And the children? Yes, she assured me. We're at Melissa's house. Melissa, her college roommate, still a close friend after all these years. I couldn't stay at home. Not after everything. Not knowing Jason might be released on bail. Has he been? No, she said, a hard edge entering her voice. I refused to post it. Let him sit there and think about what he's done. The bitterness, the hurt in her tone was palpable, and despite everything, my heart ached for her. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. When I offered to help yesterday— Don't, she interrupted. Don't apologize. You were being generous, more generous than I deserved after how I've treated you. This isn't your fault. It's Jason's. And— her voice faltered. And mine too, for not seeing who he really was. For letting things get to this point. What do you need? I asked simply. How can I help? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know, she admitted finally. Everything's such a mess. The house, the bills, the children's school, and now this. I don't even know where to start. Start with today, I suggested gently. What do you need today, right now? I need to pick up some things from the house, clothes for the kids, schoolwork, their favorite toys. But I'm afraid to go back there alone. Afraid Jason might have been released, or that he sent someone to get his things. I can come with you. I offered immediately. I have security now. They can make sure the house is safe. Stay while you get what you need. You would do that? The surprise in her voice was painful to hear. After everything? You're my daughter, Rebecca, I said simply. The children are my grandchildren. Of course I would. She started to cry then, quiet, broken sobs that tore at my heart. I don't deserve your help, she managed between tears.
I've been so awful to you.
So judgmental. So cold. We can talk about all that later, I said. Right now, let's just focus on practical matters. When do you want to go to the house? We arranged to meet at her house in 2 hours. After hanging up, I turned to find Martin watching me from the doorway, his expression unreadable. You heard? I asked. He nodded. Most of it. You're going to help her. Of course I am, I said, surprised he might think otherwise. She's my daughter. She's in trouble. Even after everything she said? Everything she did. I considered his questions seriously.
Yes.
Because that's who I am, Martin. I won't let Rebecca's mistakes, or my own hurt feelings, change the fundamental person I've always been. I can have boundaries, I can expect respect, but I won't turn my back on my child when she truly needs me. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. You're an extraordinary woman, Eleanor Winters. The compliment, unexpected and seemingly genuine, warmed me despite the chaos swirling around us. I'm just a mother, I corrected gently, doing what mothers have always done, loving imperfectly, forgiving repeatedly, and showing up when it matters most. Rebecca's house was exactly as I'd imagined from the few photos she'd shared over the years. Large, professionally landscaped, with the kind of pristine exterior that suggested regular maintenance by hired help. It sat in a subdivision of similar homes, all presenting perfect facades behind which families lived lives I could only guess at. How many of them, I wondered, were like Rebecca and Jason, stretched financially thin to maintain appearances, sacrificing relationship for status, building lives on foundations of debt and denial. And how many were genuinely content, genuinely connected, using their prosperity to enhance their happiness rather than substitute for it. Ramirez and Collins, my security team, insisted on checking the house before Rebecca and I entered. They moved with quiet efficiency, verifying that no one was inside, that no obvious signs of disturbance were present. All clear, Mrs. Winters, Ramirez reported. We'll remain on site while you're inside. Rebecca had been watching this procedure with wide eyes, the reality of my new circumstances clearly sinking in. You have actual bodyguards now? She asked as we walked toward the front door. Security consultants, I corrected mildly. After what happened at the hotel last night, Martin insisted. What happened at the hotel? Her alarm was immediate. Were you in danger? I hesitated, not wanting to add to her stress, but unwilling to lie. Someone tried to access my floor using a stolen staff key card. They also knocked on my door claiming to be security sent by Martin, which wasn't true. Nothing came of it. Hotel security responded quickly, but it was unsettling. Rebecca looked stricken. Because of the lottery? People are trying to get to you. Because of the money? Possibly, I acknowledged. Or it could have been related to Jason's accusations. We don't know for sure. She fumbled with her keys at the front door, hands shaking slightly. I never thought. I knew winning the lottery would change things for you, but I didn't consider the dangers. The concern in her voice seemed genuine, a far cry from her dismissive attitude of just days ago. Was this growth, or simply another facet of her personality that emerged when she wasn't actively resenting me? Inside, the house was beautiful but showed signs of hasty departure. A coffee cup abandoned on a side table, a child's jacket thrown over a chair, nails scattered on the kitchen counter. Rebecca moved through the space with purpose, heading upstairs to collect clothes and necessities for the children. I remained in the living room, feeling oddly intrusive despite being invited. This was Rebecca's domain, her carefully curated life from which I had been largely excluded. Family photos lined the walls and shelves. Rebecca and Jason on their wedding day, the children at various ages, professional portraits taken at regular intervals to document their growth. I appeared in none of them, not even in group shots from holidays or special occasions. My absence was a visual confirmation of what I'd always known but tried to deny, that I'd been erased from the narrative Rebecca had constructed about her life, her family. That she'd created a world where her mother was at best a footnote, at worst an embarrassment to be minimized. Mom, Rebecca's voice startled me from these thoughts. She stood at the foot of the stairs, arms full of children's clothing. Could you help me with some of their toys and books? They're in the playroom down the hall. I followed her directions to a room that any child would consider magical, walls painted with whimsical scenes, shelves filled with toys and games and books, a small table for art projects, a reading nook with plush cushions. My grandchildren, whom I barely knew, clearly wanted for nothing material. The blue backpack on the hook is Ethan's, Rebecca instructed from the doorway. If you could fill it with the dinosaur figures on the shelf and the space books on the table, that would be great. And the purple bag is Lily's. She'll want her stuffed rabbit, the one with the pink ears, and those fairy tale books on the bottom shelf. I gathered the items as directed, handling each toy, each book with care, imagining the children who loved them. Ethan was 8 now, I recalled, fascinated by science and sports. Lily had just turned 6, artistic and imaginative according to Rebecca's occasional updates. What would it be like to truly know them? To be a regular presence in their lives, not just a name they associated with Christmas gifts? The possibility that I might find out, that my third condition for helping Rebecca and Jason might actually be fulfilled, if under circumstances none of us had anticipated, filled me with both hope and uncertainty. I think that's everything, Rebecca said when we'd filled several bags with clothing and treasured possessions. At least, everything essential. We can come back for more if we need to. As we carry the bags to my car, or rather, the car that had been arranged for me, another symbol of my new status, Rebecca seemed lost in thought, her movements mechanical, her expression distant. Where are the children now? I asked as we loaded the trunk. With Melissa's nanny, she replied. They think it's a fun sleepover at Aunt Melissa's. They don't know about Jason, about any of it. What will you tell them? She leaned against the car, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know. How do you tell your children that their father stole from them? That he forged documents and lied, and might go to jail? I had no answer for that. My own experience as a parent hadn't prepared me for such a conversation. Frank had been gone before Rebecca was old enough to form lasting memories of him. Explaining death to a child was painful but straightforward compared to explaining betrayal. Maybe you don't need to tell them everything right away, I suggested. Just that there are some adult problems you and their father are working through, and that they'll be staying with you at Melissa's for a while. Rebecca nodded, accepting this simplified approach. Mom, she said after a moment, her voice small, I don't know what to do next. About the house, about Jason, about any of it. The vulnerability in her tone, the open admission of uncertainty, was so unlike the Rebecca I'd known in recent years. The woman who always had answers, who navigated life with confident efficiency, who had no need for her mother's advice or support. You don't have to figure it all out today, I said gently. Some decisions can wait. Focus on making sure you and the children are safe and stable for now. And then what? She pressed. The mortgage is behind. Jason's car will be repossessed soon if the payments aren't made. The children's school is expecting tuition for next semester. I haven't worked since Lily was born. Who's going to hire me now, with 2 children to care for and a husband facing fraud charges? The cascade of problems was overwhelming, especially for someone used to financial security, to having solutions at hand. I could see panic rising in her eyes, her breathing becoming shallow. Rebecca, I said firmly, placing my hands on her shoulders. Look at me. She did, her eyes wide and frightened. We will figure this out. Not all at once, but step by step. I promise to help, and that promise still stands, even more so now that I understand the full situation. But Jason made his own choices, I interrupted. His actions don't change my commitment to you and the children. The conditions I set yesterday still apply. Direct payments to institutions, expectations that you find some form of income eventually, and a real relationship with my grandchildren. But right now, your priority is stabilizing your situation, and I'll help with that however I can. Relief and something like shame crossed her face. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered. After how I've treated you. After what I said. It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly since learning of Jason's arrest. Why help someone who had wounded me so deeply? Why extend myself for a daughter who had pushed me away for years? Because I love you, I said simply. Because you're my child and nothing changes that. Not cruel words, not years of distance, not even betrayal. I paused, wanting her to understand the nuance. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences, or that our relationship doesn't need to change. It just means I won't abandon you when you truly need help. She began to cry then, not the pretty, controlled tears she'd shed in my hotel suite during our first meeting after the lottery, but raw, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. I held her as she wept, this grown woman who had once been my baby, who had held my hand crossing streets, who had turned to me first with every triumph and tragedy of childhood. When had we lost that connection? When had mutual resentment replaced mutual trust? Was it when Frank died, leaving me overwhelmed and her without a father? Was it when she went to college, entering a world of privilege I couldn't comprehend or participate in? Was it when she married Jason, who perhaps saw me as an embarrassing reminder of Rebecca's less polished origins? Or had it been 1,000 tiny moments, 1,000 small choices on both our parts, pulling us incrementally but inexorably apart until we were strangers who shared blood but little else? I'm sorry, Rebecca said when she could speak again, wiping her face with shaking hands. For everything. For being so horrible to you. For caring more about appearances than about what really matters. I know, I said and meant it. This apology, unlike the one in my hotel suite, rang true, prompted not by calculation, but by genuine remorse. I want to be better, she continued. To be the kind of mother you were to me, the kind who puts her children first, who works herself to the bone for them, who never complains about the sacrifices. I smiled sadly at this idealized version of my motherhood.
I complained plenty, I corrected gently.
And I made mistakes. Many of them. But I always loved you, Rebecca. Even when I was exhausted, even when I was frustrated, even when I felt like I was failing, I loved you without condition or reservation. She nodded, accepting this more realistic portrait. Can we start over? Not forget everything that's happened, but move forward differently? I'd like that, I said, meaning it despite the caution experience had taught me to maintain. But it will take time, Rebecca. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight. I know, she acknowledged. I'll earn it back. Somehow. As we drove away from her house, her former life, in many ways, I wondered if this crisis might ultimately prove to be a blessing in disguise for both of us. Not Jason's betrayal, which was unequivocally painful, but the shattering of pretenses it had forced, the stripping away of facades to reveal the wounded, imperfect, genuine people beneath. Perhaps now, with both of us changed by circumstance, me by sudden wealth, her by sudden crisis, we might find our way back to each other, not as the mother and daughter we had been, but as the women we were becoming. The next week passed in a blur of practical matters and emotional adjustments. Rebecca and the children remained at Melissa's, though the arrangement was becoming strained as days stretched into a week. Jason had been released on bail, posted by his parents, not Rebecca, but was under court order to stay away from her and the children pending resolution of the charges against him. Rebecca had filed for emergency custody and a restraining order, actions that Martin had helped facilitate through a family law colleague. The reality of their situation, that her marriage was likely over, that her life was irrevocably changed, seemed to be sinking in gradually, painfully. Meanwhile, I closed on my new house, a process expedited by my all-cash offer and Martin's efficient handling of the paperwork. The furniture I'd selected was delivered and arranged, with Greta from the gallery personally overseeing the placement of each piece, making suggestions for additional items that would complete each room. "It's coming together beautifully," she declared as we stood in the sun-filled living room, admiring how the space was transforming from an empty shell to a home that reflected my personality. "You have excellent taste, Eleanor. Not everyone does, regardless of budget." I smiled at the compliment, still unused to receiving praise for something as seemingly frivolous as taste. All my life, I'd been valued for utility, for working hard, for solving problems, for enduring without complaint. To be appreciated for an aesthetic sense I hadn't known I possessed was novel and quietly thrilling. "There's still so much to do," I said, looking around at the spaces yet to be filled, the walls yet to be adorned. Art for the walls, accessories for the tables, linens for the beds. "All in good time," Greta assured me. A house should evolve, collect meaningful pieces gradually. The worst mistake new homeowners make is rushing to fill every space immediately, ending up with rooms that look like furniture showrooms rather than lived-in homes. Her philosophy aligned with my instinctive approach. I wanted each item in my new home to have meaning, to bring me joy, to reflect some aspect of my identity or experience. I'd waited 63 years for a home like this. I could wait a little longer to perfect it. As Greta prepared to leave, having finalized the placement of the dining room furniture, she hesitated at the door. "Eleanor, I hope you don't mind my asking, but will you be living here alone?" The question caught me off guard. Yes.
Just me.
She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's a wonderful house for entertaining. For family gatherings, for dinner parties, for holidays. I hope you'll fill it with people you care about, not just beautiful things." "I hope so too," I said, though the prospect seemed distant, almost fantastical. Who would I entertain? My circle of friends had always been small, mostly work acquaintances like Margie from Danwell's. My family consisted of Rebecca and the grandchildren, our relationship still fragile, still uncertain. "Perhaps a housewarming party when you're settled," Greta suggested. "Nothing elaborate, just a few people who matter to you, to bless the space with good energy from the beginning." The idea took root as she left, growing in appeal as I moved through the rooms of my new home. A small gathering, yes. Margie, of course. Martin, who had become so much more than my attorney. Perhaps Janice from the library, who had been so understanding about my abrupt departure. Rebecca and the children, if they felt ready for such an occasion. A beginning. A statement of intent for this new chapter of my life. A declaration that wealth might have changed my circumstances, but it hadn't changed my fundamental desire for connection, for community, for meaning beyond material comfort. I was contemplating potential dates for such a gathering when my phone rang. Martin's name flashed on the screen, an increasingly familiar and welcome sight. "Martin." I greeted him warmly. "How are you?" "I'm well. Thank you, he replied, his voice carrying its usual blend of professionalism and personal warmth. I'm calling with some news regarding Jason's case. My mood sobered immediately. What's happened? The district attorney has offered a plea deal, Martin explained. Reduced charges in exchange for restitution of the education fund, community service, and probation. No jail time, assuming he complies with all conditions. That seems lenient, I observed, unsure how to feel about this development. It's fairly standard for first-time offenders in financial crimes where no money was actually taken, Martin said. The real consequences for Jason will be professional. This will be on his record, which will make finding employment in his field extremely difficult. Has he accepted the deal? Not yet. His attorney has 48 hours to respond. I thought you should know, as it may affect Rebecca's decisions moving forward. Rebecca. Yes, this would certainly impact her plans, her choices about the marriage, about their future as a family. Thank you for letting me know, I said. I'll call her. There's one more thing, Martin added, his tone shifting slightly. The closing paperwork for your house is complete. You are officially the owner of 47 Oakview Lane. Despite the seriousness of our conversation about Jason, I couldn't help the surge of joy at this confirmation. It's really mine? I can move in. Whenever you're ready, Martin confirmed, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The security system has been upgraded as recommended, all utilities are connected, and the property is legally yours. I want to move in this weekend. I decided on the spot. Most of the furniture has been delivered. The rest can come later. I just want to be there, sleep there, wake up in my own home. That can certainly be arranged, Martin assured me. I'll have the security team coordinate the move of your personal belongings from the hotel. Is there anything else you need to make this transition smooth? There was something, though it had nothing to do with practical arrangements. Would you come for dinner? I asked impulsively. Saturday evening, once I'm somewhat settled. Nothing fancy, just a first meal in my new home. The brief silence that followed made me immediately regret the invitation. Had I overstepped? Misinterpreted the nature of our relationship? I'd be honored, Martin said finally, his voice warmer than I'd ever heard it. Shall I bring wine? Relief and pleasure flooded through me. Yes, that would be lovely. Around 7. 7 it is. I look forward to it, Eleanor. After we hung up, I stood in what would soon be my kitchen, a smile I couldn't suppress spreading across my face. It wasn't a date, not really, not in the romantic sense that term implied. Martin was my attorney, my advisor, perhaps even my friend. But the prospect of sharing my first evening in my new home with him filled me with an anticipation I hadn't felt in years. First, though, I needed to call Rebecca to share the news about Jason's plea deal and see how she was handling this latest development. Our relationship remained tentative, each conversation a careful navigation of old wounds and new realities, but we were talking, really talking, for the first time in years. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired but composed. Mom? Is everything all right? Yes, everything's fine, I assured her. Martin just called with news about Jason's case. The district attorney has offered a plea deal, reduced charges, no jail time, but restitution and probation. I know, she said, surprising me. Jason's lawyer called me an hour ago. Wanted to know if I'd consider dropping the restraining order as part of the agreement. And will you? I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral, non-judgmental. She sighed heavily. I don't know. Part of me wants to punish him, to make this as difficult as possible after what he did. But another part thinks of the children. I finished when she trailed off. Of what's best for them long term. Exactly. The word was barely above a whisper. They love their father, Mom. Whatever else he's done, however badly he's betrayed me, he's been a good dad to them. Do I have the right to cut him out of their lives completely? It was a question I couldn't answer for her, a balance I couldn't strike on her behalf. What does your heart tell you? I asked instead. That I'm still too angry to think clearly, she admitted with surprising self-awareness. That I need to separate my feelings as a betrayed wife from my responsibilities as a mother. that the decisions I make now will affect Ethan and Lily for the rest of their lives. Those sound like wise realizations, I said, proud of her clarity despite the emotional chaos she must be feeling. I've been thinking a lot lately, she continued, about choices, about consequences, about how we ended up here, not just the financial mess and Jason's crime, but everything. Our marriage, my relationship with you, the kind of mother I've been, the kind of daughter I've been. I waited, sensing she needed to articulate these thoughts without interruption. I've been so focused on appearances, she said finally. On having the right house, the right car, the right schools for the kids. On looking successful, looking perfect. And in the process, I lost sight of what actually matters. Of who I wanted to be, deep down. And who is that? I asked softly. Who do you want to be, Rebecca? Someone with integrity, she said immediately. Someone who values relationships over possessions. Someone my children can respect, not just for what I give them materially, but for who I am as a person. She paused. Someone more like you, Mom. The words caught me off guard, emotion rising in my throat. Me? Yes, you. Her voice strengthened with conviction. You, who worked multiple jobs without complaint to raise me alone. You who never missed a school event despite exhaustion. You who taught me by example that character matters more than status, that kindness matters more than stuff. I didn't think you saw any of that. I admitted, memories of her teenage disdain, her adult dismissiveness fresh in my mind. I saw, she said quietly. I just rejected it for a while. Convinced myself that your life was something to escape from, not something to honor. I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. The apology implicit in her words filled a crack in my heart I'd thought would remain forever, a wound so familiar I'd stopped noticing its constant ache. We all make mistakes, I said, blinking back tears. The important thing is recognizing them, learning from them, doing better moving forward. That's what I'm trying to do now, she said. Figure out what better looks like. For me, for the kids. For us, you and me. One day at a time, I advised. Starting with what's right in front of you. Jason's plea deal, she acknowledged. The restraining order. Where we'll live if we can't keep the house. The last concern gave me an opening I'd been contemplating for days. About that, I said carefully. I have a suggestion if you're open to hearing it. Of course. I close on my new house this week. I'll be moving in this weekend. It's much larger than I need for bedrooms, plenty of space. I took a deep breath. You and the children could stay with me, at least temporarily, until you decide what's next. The silence that followed was so complete I wondered if the call had dropped. Rebecca? I prompted after several seconds. You would do that? She asked finally, her voice thick with emotion. After everything? You're my daughter, I said simply. The children are my grandchildren. Of course I would. But we'd be intruding on your new life, your fresh start. Or maybe you'd be part of that fresh start, I suggested. A chance for all of us to begin again, to build the kind of family we should have been all along. I don't know what to say, she admitted, and I could hear the tears in her voice. Say you'll think about it, I offered. That's all I'm asking. And know that the invitation stands, whenever you're ready. After we hung up, I wandered through the rooms of what would soon be my home. My home, seeing them with new eyes. The guest bedroom that could become Ethan's room, with space for his dinosaurs and science books. The sunny corner bedroom perfect for Lily, where her stuffed rabbit and fairy tales would find a welcoming home. The family room where we might gather for movies or games, building memories to replace the years of distance. It wasn't how I'd imagined my new life beginning. It wasn't the peaceful, private sanctuary I'd envisioned when I first walked through these rooms with Carla. But perhaps it could be something even better. A home in the truest sense, filled with the voices and energy of family, with the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of relationships being healed, of connections being restored. Perhaps this, finally, was what the lottery had really won me. Not just financial freedom, but the freedom to become the woman I'd always wanted to be, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Saturday arrived with the brilliant clarity of early fall, crisp air, golden sunlight, leaves just beginning to hint at the spectacle of color to come. Moving day. The start of my new life in my new home. I'd awakened before dawn in the hotel suite that had been my temporary residence since the lottery win, too excited to sleep. By 8 o'clock, the security team had arrived to coordinate the move, along with a small team of professional movers hired to transport my few personal belongings from the hotel and the boxes I'd packed for my apartment. Martin had urged me not to return to the apartment myself, concerned about lingering media attention or potential security risks. Instead, he'd arranged for trusted staff to pack my belongings according to my detailed instructions, ensuring that nothing of value, sentimental or financial, was overlooked. By noon, I was standing in the foyer of my new home, watching as the movers carried in the last of the boxes. Most contained clothing, personal papers, photographs, and the few keepsakes I'd accumulated over decades of modest living. They looked almost pitiful against the backdrop of the grand house with its high ceilings and elegant spaces, these cardboard containers holding the sum total of my previous existence. "Where would you like these, Mrs. Winters?" one of the movers asked, indicating boxes labeled kitchen. "In the kitchen, please," I directed, then paused, struck by the strangeness of the situation. For the first time in my life, I was giving instructions to people working in my home, not as a guest, not as an employee myself, but as the owner, the person in charge. It was a small moment, but it highlighted the profound shift in my circumstances. I was no longer Eleanor the grocery clerk, Eleanor the widow, Eleanor the woman who counted pennies and worked night shifts. I was Mrs. Winters, lottery winner, homeowner, employer. The reality of this transformation washed over me as I moved through the house, directing the placement of boxes, overseeing the arrangement of my few treasured possessions among the new furniture. By mid-afternoon, the movers had departed, the security team had completed their final checks of the property, and I was alone in my new home. Alone and overwhelmed. I sank onto the sofa in the living room, suddenly exhausted not just physically, but emotionally. This was everything I'd ever dreamed of: security, comfort, beauty, space. So why did I feel so untethered, so uncertain? The house was quiet around me, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the still air. It was beautiful, undeniably so. But it didn't yet feel like mine, like home. It felt like an elaborate stage set, waiting for the actors to arrive, for the story to begin. My phone rang, breaking the silence. Rebecca's name on the screen. "Hi," I answered, oddly comforted by the interruption. "Everything okay?" "Yes, fine," she assured me. "I just wanted to check how the move was going. Are you all settled in?" "The boxes are all here," I said, looking around at the partially unpacked living room. "Whether I'm settled is another question entirely." "It must be overwhelming," she said, understanding in her voice. "Such a big change all at once." "It is," I admitted. "The house is beautiful, everything I could have wanted, but it feels, I don't know, not quite real yet." "It will," she promised. "Once you've lived in it a while. Once you've made memories there." Memories. Yes, that was what was missing, the layer of life that transforms a house into a home, that gives spaces meaning beyond their physical attributes. "Have you thought any more about my offer?" I asked, changing the subject. "About staying here, you and the children?" She hesitated before answering. "I have. And I think we'd like that, Mom. At least for a while, until I figure out next steps. If you're sure it wouldn't be an imposition." Relief and joy flooded through me, surprising in their intensity. "I'm absolutely sure. When would you want to come?" "Is tomorrow too soon?" she asked tentatively. "Melissa's been wonderful, but I can tell we're stretching her hospitality. And the kids are confused, unsettled. They need some stability." "Tomorrow is perfect," I assured her. "The children's rooms aren't fully furnished yet, but we can shop for what they need together. Make it a project." "You don't have to do that," she protested. "We can bring their beds from the house, their dressers. No need to buy all new things." "If that's what you prefer," I said, careful not to push. This was new territory for both of us, Me learning not to overcompensate with financial gestures, her learning to accept help without shame. Whatever makes them most comfortable during the transition. We spoke for a few more minutes, working out logistics for the following day. When we hung up, I felt lighter, more grounded. The prospect of the house filled with family, with life, eased some of the strange disconnection I'd been feeling. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking, arranging my clothes in the massive master closet where they occupied perhaps a quarter of the available space, placing family photos on the mantel, setting up my modest book collection in the library shelves that could have held 10 times as many volumes. By early evening, I'd done enough to make the house minimally functional: toiletries and bathrooms, sheets on beds, coffee maker ready for morning. The rest could wait. For now, I needed to prepare for Martin's visit, our dinner in my new home. I showered and changed into a dress I'd bought during a shopping excursion earlier in the week, a simple wrap style in deep teal that Greta had assured me complemented both my coloring and my new living room decor. The coincidence had made us both laugh, but I'd purchased it anyway, appreciating how it made me feel both elegant and comfortable. For dinner, I'd arranged for catering from a restaurant Martin had mentioned enjoying. Nothing elaborate, just a meal I wouldn't have to cook myself on my first night in a new kitchen. It would be delivered at 7, just as he arrived. At precisely 6:58, the security system chimed, alerting me to someone at the gate. Through the monitor in the kitchen, I saw Martin's car waiting to be admitted. My heart gave an unexpected flutter as I pressed the button to open the gate, watching as his car proceeded up the driveway to the front of the house. He arrived at the door moments later, a bottle of wine in one hand, a small gift bag in the other. I opened the door before he could ring the bell, welcoming him with a smile I couldn't suppress.
Martin, come in.
Welcome to my home. He stepped inside, his eyes taking in the foyer with its soaring ceiling and elegant staircase before returning to me. Eleanor, he said warmly, you look lovely. And the house, it's magnificent. Thank you, I said, accepting both compliments with a grace I was still learning. For both. He handed me the wine, a red I didn't recognize but assumed was excellent given Martin's obvious knowledge of such things. For dinner, he explained. Then, more hesitantly, he offered the gift bag. And this is a small housewarming gift. Just a tradition. Inside the bag, nestled in tissue paper, was a small crystal bird, wings outstretched as if in flight, catching the light in rainbow prisms. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's meant to bring light and joy to a new home, Martin explained. An old superstition, perhaps, but a nice one, I've always thought. I love it, I assured him, placing the crystal bird on a small table where sunlight would catch it in the mornings. Thank you. The catering arrived moments later, perfect timing that allowed us to move smoothly from greetings to the practical business of serving dinner. I'd arranged for the food to be delivered ready to plate, no preparation required beyond opening containers and arranging the contents attractively. We settled at the dining table, where I'd set places with the new china and silver I'd purchased, another first, another small symbol of my changed circumstances. Martin opened the wine, pouring for both of us before raising his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said simply, and to the remarkable woman brave enough to embrace them. We clinked glasses, the crystal making a pure, clear sound in the quiet room. To new beginnings, I echoed, touched by his words. Conversation flowed easily as we ate, moving from practical matters like the security system and remaining furniture deliveries to more personal topics. Martin's background growing up in San Francisco, my early years with Frank, stories of Rebecca as a child. She and the children will be moving in tomorrow, I shared as we finished the main course. Temporarily, at least, until she figures out next steps. Martin's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a significant development. How do you feel about it? Nervous, I admitted. Excited. Hopeful. I smiled ruefully. Terrified I'm setting myself up for more hurt. All natural reactions, he assured me. It's a big step for both of you. Do you think I'm making a mistake? I asked, valuing his perspective, his objectivity. He considered the question seriously before answering. I think you're taking a calculated risk, he said finally. Based on what you've told me, Rebecca seems genuinely remorseful, genuinely interested in rebuilding your relationship. The crisis with Jason has forced her to reevaluate many things, including her treatment of you. But, I prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in his tone. But people in crisis sometimes make promises, show remorse, seek connection that they can't sustain once the immediate danger has passed, he acknowledged. I've seen it happen. The true test will come when she's back on her feet, when she has options again. It was a fair assessment, one I'd considered myself in quiet moments of doubt. I know, I said softly. But she's my daughter, Martin. If there's even a chance of healing what's broken between us, don't I have to try? Of course you do, he agreed, his expression softening. Just proceed with hope tempered by wisdom. Set boundaries. Protect your heart, even as you open it. Protect my heart. The phrase lingered as we moved to the living room with our wine glasses, settling on the sofa to continue our conversation. Was that something I knew how to do? My heart had been broken so many times, by Frank's early death, by Rebecca's rejection, by years of struggle and loneliness. Yet here I was still willing to risk, to trust, to hope. Tell me about your daughter, Martin said after a comfortable silence. Not the recent drama, but who she is. What she was like growing up. The question opened a floodgate of memories. Rebecca at 5, staging elaborate plays with her stuffed animals as the cast. Rebecca at 10, determinedly teaching herself to ride a bike after I couldn't afford lessons. Rebecca at 16, brilliant and beautiful and already pulling away, already looking beyond the modest life I could provide. She was always exceptional, I said, lost in recollection. Always destined for more than I could give her. I think that's where the resentment began, her awareness that my limitations were holding her back, at least in her mind. Or perhaps, Martin suggested gently, her awareness that she couldn't reciprocate your sacrifices, that she was taking while you were giving. That's a hard position for a child, especially a sensitive, intelligent one. I'd never considered that perspective, that Rebecca's distance might have stemmed not from ingratitude, but from a kind of guilt, a recognition of imbalance she couldn't correct. It cast our relationship in a new light, one that felt both revelatory and healing. You're very wise, I told Martin, touched by his insight. About people, about relationships. He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Experience is a thorough teacher, if not always a gentle one. The statement hinted at personal history, at lessons learned through pain. I wanted to ask, to know more about this man who had become so important in my life, but hesitated, unsure of the boundaries between us. My wife died 12 years ago, he said, as if reading my unspoken question.
Cancer.
It was brutal. Quick, but brutal. I'm so sorry, I said, the inadequate words all I had to offer. We had 30 years together, he continued, his gaze distant with memory. Good years, mostly. 2 children who are now adults with families of their own. A life well lived, despite its premature end. Do you see your children often? I asked, curious about this aspect of his life he'd never mentioned. Not as often as I'd like, he admitted. My daughter lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 boys. My son is in Chicago, a professor at Northwestern. We talk regularly, visit when we can. But distance makes regular connection challenging. Another parallel between us. Adult children living separate lives. Connections maintained across gaps of geography and circumstance. But unlike Rebecca and me, Martin and his children had maintained their bonds despite the distance, had found ways to remain family even when apart. What's your secret? I asked, only half joking. For staying close despite the distance? He considered the question seriously. Respect, he said finally. On both sides. I respect their independence, their choices, their busy lives. They respect my experience, my perspective, my continued growth as a person separate from my identity as their father. He smiled slightly. And we make the effort. Regular calls, planned visits, genuine interest in each other's lives. Not complicated, really. Just intentional. Intentional. The word resonated, capturing what had been missing in my relationship with Rebecca for so long. We'd both stopped trying, stopped making the effort, stopped seeing each other as people worthy of curiosity and care. I hope Rebecca and I can build that kind of relationship, I said. Starting now, with this time together. I believe you can, Martin said, his confidence warming me. You both seem ready, willing to do the work. That's the essential first step. The conversation meandered from there, touching on books we'd both enjoyed, places we'd traveled or hoped to visit, memories of other lives lived before our current incarnations. Outside, darkness fell, the automatic landscape lighting illuminating the gardens in soft, warm pools. Inside, lamps glowed in corners, creating an intimacy that felt both novel and entirely natural. It was nearly midnight when Martin finally prepared to leave, both of us surprised by how quickly the hours had passed, how comfortably we'd talked, how much we'd shared. This was lovely, Eleanor, he said as I walked him to the door. Thank you for including me in your first evening in your new home. Thank you for coming, I replied, genuinely grateful for his company, for the way his presence had transformed the empty house into a space filled with conversation, connection, warmth. It wouldn't have been the same without you. He hesitated at the threshold, something unspoken in his eyes. For a breathless moment, I thought he might kiss me, hoped he might kiss me, a realization that caught me entirely off guard. Instead, he took my hand, squeezing it gently. Good night, Eleanor. I'll call you tomorrow, see how the move-in with Rebecca goes. Good night, Martin. I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Drive safely. After he left, I moved through the house turning off lights, checking doors, performing the ritual of securing my home for the night. My home. The phrase still felt foreign, still carried a sense of unreality. But less so than before dinner, before Martin's visit had filled these rooms with conversation and laughter, with the beginning of memories that would, in time, make this house truly mine. In the master bedroom, I prepared for sleep, changing into pajamas, completing my nighttime routine in the luxurious bathroom with its soaking tub and dual vanities. The bed, when I finally slipped between the crisp sheets, was more comfortable than any I'd ever known. The mattress perfectly supportive, the linen soft against my skin, the room at precisely the temperature I preferred. Yet as I lay in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settlings of my new home, I found myself thinking not of material comforts, but of connections, of Rebecca and the grandchildren coming tomorrow, of Martin's hand holding mine, of the possibility that wealth had given me not just financial security, but a second chance at relationships I'd thought forever damaged or lost. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of crystal birds taking flight, of doors opening, of light streaming into rooms long kept dark. Dreams of beginning again, at 63, a life I'd never dared to imagine. I was awakened just after dawn by my phone, ringing on the nightstand. Disoriented in the unfamiliar room, I fumbled for it, checking the screen through bleary eyes. Not Rebecca, not Martin, a number I didn't recognize. Hello, I answered cautiously. Mrs. Eleanor Winters? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Yes, this is she. Mrs. Winters, this is Sergeant Lopez with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about a situation involving your son-in-law, Jason Winters. Fully awake now, I sat up, alarm coursing through me. What's happened? There's been an incident at your daughter's residence, ma'am. Mr. Winters was found dead early this morning, apparent suicide. Your daughter is with officers now. She asked us to contact you. The words hit like physical blows. Jason.
Dead. Suicide.
Rebecca with officers. Each phrase a hammer strike against my consciousness, against the tentative peace I'd begun to build. Where is she? I managed, already getting out of bed, mentally calculating how quickly I could dress, how soon I could reach her. Where are the children? Your daughter is at Memorial Hospital, ma'am. The children are with a family friend, a Ms. Melissa Chun, I believe. Your daughter was present when Mr. Winters was found. She's being treated for shock. Present. The euphemism chilled me. Rebecca had found him. had seen whatever violent end Jason had chosen for himself. "I'll be there as soon as possible," I promised, ending the call and immediately dialing Martin's number, needing his steady presence, his guidance through what promised to be a nightmare day. He answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. "Eleanor? Is everything all right?" "No," I said, my voice breaking on the single syllable. "It's Jason."
He's dead. Suicide.
Rebecca found him. She's at the hospital. The children are with Melissa. "I don't know what to do, Martin. I don't know what to do." "I'm on my way," he said immediately, no hesitation, no questions. "Stay where you are. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. We'll go to the hospital together." "Thank you," I whispered, gratitude and fear and grief all tangled in my voice. As I dressed quickly, my mind raced with questions, with scenarios, with the awful implications of Jason's final, desperate act. What had driven him to this? What had Rebecca seen? How would the children cope with losing their father this way? And beneath these immediate concerns, a darker, more selfish thought that filled me with shame even as it surfaced. Was this somehow my fault? Had my lottery win, my conditions, my involvement in their lives somehow contributed to this tragedy? The questions had no answers, not yet. Perhaps not ever. All I knew for certain was that my daughter needed me now more than she ever had before. And I would be there for her, whatever came next. Martin arrived as promised, his car pulling up to the house exactly 20 minutes after our call. I was waiting at the door, purse in hand, steeled for whatever lay ahead. "Eleanor," he said as I slid into the passenger seat, his face grave with concern. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you for coming," I said, fighting to maintain composure. "For driving me. I don't think I could." "Of course," he cut in gently. "That's what friends are for."
Friends.
Yes, he was that now, more than my attorney, more than my advisor. A friend when I needed one most desperately. As we drove toward the hospital, toward the new crisis that had erupted just as life seemed to be settling into a hopeful pattern, I found myself reaching for Martin's hand across the console. He took it without hesitation, his grip firm, grounding. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, eyes on the road ahead, "you are not alone in this, Eleanor. Remember that." Not alone. The words echoed in my mind, a promise, a lifeline. After decades of handling every crisis by myself, of being the strong one, the one others depended on, the idea that I now had support, had partnership, was still new, still startling in its power. Whatever came next, the hospital, Rebecca's trauma, the children's grief, the inevitable questions and investigations, I would face it with this knowledge. I was not alone. Not anymore. And in that realization, amid all the shock and sadness, I found a small, solid core of strength to carry me forward into the uncertain hours ahead. The hospital corridor stretched before me like a tunnel with no end, fluorescent lights casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow. My heels clicked against the linoleum as I followed the nurse, Martin close behind me, his steady presence the only thing keeping me upright. If you're still with me on this emotional roller coaster, hit that subscribe button. Have you ever had to comfort someone through an unimaginable loss? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one while gathering strength for what came next. "She's through here," the nurse said, stopping outside a private room. "The doctor gave her something for the shock, so she may be a bit drowsy. Try not to upset her." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. "What do you say to your daughter, who has just found her husband dead by his own hand? What comfort can you possibly offer in the face of such horror?" The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting shadows across the walls. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, still dressed in what looked like pajamas, a hospital blanket draped around her shoulders. Her face was ashen, her eyes vacant, fixed on some middle distance I couldn't perceive. "Rebecca," I said softly, approaching slowly as if she were a wounded animal that might startle. "Sweetheart, I'm here." She looked up, her gaze taking a moment to focus on my face. "Mom?" Her voice was small, fragile, like a child's. "Yes, darling. I'm here." I sat beside her, tentatively putting an arm around her shoulders, unsure if my touch would be welcome or intrusive in her grief. To my surprise, she collapsed against me, her body suddenly racked with violent sobs. "I found him," she gasped between jagged breaths. "In the garage." He. She couldn't finish, her words dissolving into wordless keening. I held her as she wept, my own tears falling silently into her hair. Not for Jason, though I wouldn't wish such a desperate end on anyone, but for her, for the children, for the trauma that would now forever be part of their story. Martin stood quietly by the door, giving us privacy while remaining available if needed. His presence was a comfort even at a distance, a reminder that in this nightmare, I wasn't alone. We weren't alone. Eventually, Rebecca's sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. She pulled away slightly, wiping her face with the back of her hand in a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that it broke my heart anew. "The kids," she said, her voice hoarse. "They don't know yet. Melissa has them at her house. She told them I had to go to the hospital for a checkup." Her face crumpled again. "How do I tell them, Mom? How do I tell my children their father is dead? That he chose to leave them?" It was the question I'd been dreading, the one I had no good answer for. "I don't know, sweetheart," I admitted. "But you won't have to do it alone. I'll be right there with you if you want me to be." She nodded, clinging to my hand like it was a lifeline.
Please.
"I can't do this by myself." She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Why did he do it, Mom? Was it because of the fraud charges? Because I wouldn't bail him out? Because I filed for the restraining order?" "No," I said firmly, needing her to understand this wasn't her fault. "Jason made his own choices, all of them. From the financial mess to the fraud attempt to this final act. None of that is on you, Rebecca. None of it. But if I had just—" "No," I interrupted, more strongly this time. "That path leads nowhere but to more pain.
Trust me on this."
I spent years after your father died wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have saved him somehow. It nearly destroyed me, that kind of thinking." She fell silent, absorbing my words. After a moment, she glanced toward the door, seeming to notice Martin for the first time. "Who's that?" she asked, confusion clouding her face. "This is Martin Chun, my attorney," I explained, motioning him closer. "And my friend. He drove me here." Martin approached, his expression compassionate, but respectful of her grief. "Ms. Winters, I'm so sorry for your loss. If there's anything I can do to help during this difficult time, please don't hesitate to ask." Rebecca studied him for a moment, then looked back at me, a question in her eyes despite her shock. "Your friend?" she repeated, picking up on the nuance I'd included without thinking. "Yes," I said simply, not elaborating. This wasn't the time to explain the complex relationship that had developed between Martin and me. "He's been very helpful since the lottery." She accepted this with a nod, too overwhelmed by her immediate circumstances to inquire further. "When can I leave here?" she asked, looking around the sterile hospital room with sudden distaste. "I need to see the children. I need to." She trailed off, perhaps realizing there was no normal to return to, no routine that could accommodate the seismic shift that had just occurred in their lives. "I'll check with the doctor," Martin offered, stepping back toward the door. "See what the discharge process involves." While he was gone, Rebecca leaned against me again, her body heavy with exhaustion and grief. "What happens now, Mom?" she whispered. "Everything's such a mess. The house, the finances, Jason's parents, God, I haven't even called them yet. And the funeral. There has to be a funeral." The practical concerns tumbling from her lips were a shield, I knew, against the emotional tidal wave threatening to drown her. Logistics were safer than feelings, tasks easier than grief. "One step at a time," I counseled, rubbing slow circles on her back as I had when she was small and frightened by thunderstorms. "Right now, let's focus on getting you discharged and reunited with the children. The rest we'll handle as it comes together." Martin returned with a doctor, a compassionate woman who examined Rebecca briefly before authorizing her release. "You've experienced a severe traumatic shock, Mrs. Winters," the doctor explained. "The medication I've prescribed will help manage anxiety in the short term, but I strongly recommend you see a grief counselor as soon as possible. For yourself and for your children." Rebecca nodded mechanically, clearly not fully processing the advice, but accepting the prescription the doctor handed her. I made a mental note to follow up, to ensure she got the professional support she would need in the days and weeks ahead. The drive to Melissa's house was silent, Rebecca staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. I sat beside her in the back seat, Martin driving with occasional concerned glances in the rearview mirror. What was she thinking? What memories were playing behind her vacant eyes? I couldn't begin to imagine the horror she had witnessed, the image she would now carry forever. Melissa met us at the door, her face drawn with concern. "They're watching a movie," she whispered, nodding toward the family room where childish laughter could be heard, a surreal counterpoint to the grief hanging over the adults. "They've been asking for you, but I've kept them distracted." "Thank you," Rebecca said, her voice flat. "For everything." "Do you want me to stay?" Melissa asked. "While you talk to them?" Rebecca looked at me, uncertainty clouding her features. "Mom, whatever you want," I said. "This is your decision." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Just Mom, I think. The kids know her. They'll feel safer with both of us there." Melissa nodded, understanding. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me." Rebecca squared her shoulders, a gesture of courage that brought tears to my eyes. Then she walked toward the sound of her children's voices, preparing to deliver news that would change their lives forever. I followed, my heart breaking for all of them, for Rebecca, forced to shatter her children's world, for Ethan and Lily, about to lose the security of having a father, even for Jason, whose despair had driven him to such a final, devastating choice. The conversation that followed was the hardest I'd ever witnessed. Rebecca, sitting between her children on Melissa's sofa, holding their small hands in hers, finding words simple enough for a 6-year-old to grasp yet honest enough for an 8-year-old to trust. There were tears, oceans of them, and questions no one could answer, and moments of disbelief followed by crushing recognition. Through it all, I sat nearby, stepping in when Rebecca faltered, offering tissues and embraces and reassurances that they were loved, that they would be okay, that they would get through this together. "But where will we live?" Ethan asked in a small voice, after the first storm of grief had passed. "If Daddy's gone, and we can't go home?" Rebecca looked at me, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. I nodded, understanding what she needed. "You'll come stay with me," I told them gently. "All of you. In my new house. There's plenty of room, and we can make it as temporary or as permanent as you need it to be." "Grandma's house?" Lily asked, her tear-stained face brightening just slightly. "The big one with the swimming pool you told us about?" "That's right," I confirmed, surprised Rebecca had already mentioned it to them. "With the swimming pool and the big backyard and lots of space for your toys and books." "Can we go now?" Ethan asked, looking around Melissa's house with sudden anxiety, as if the walls might close in on them at any moment. "I don't want to stay here anymore." "Not today, sweetheart," Rebecca explained, her voice strained but gentle. "There are things we need to take care of first. But soon. Very soon." Those things consumed the next week, a blur of necessary horrors that no one should have to face. The official identification of Jason's body. The police investigation that confirmed suicide, documenting the note he left blaming financial pressures and personal failures, without specifically mentioning anyone. The notifications to family and friends. The arrangements with the funeral home. The selection of a casket. The writing of an obituary. Through it all, I stayed close to Rebecca and the children, offering whatever support I could, practical help with phone calls and arrangements, emotional strength when hers faltered, financial assistance that she now accepted without protest or pride. Martin, too, proved invaluable, using his legal expertise to navigate the bureaucratic aspects of death, his connections to expedite processes that might otherwise have dragged on painfully. The funeral itself was a small, somber affair. Jason's parents had flown in from Arizona, hollow-eyed with grief and confusion, struggling to understand their son's final desperate act. They treated Rebecca with a distant politeness that bordered on cold, as if assigning her some unspoken blame for what had happened. "They think I drove him to it," she whispered to me as we stood at the graveside, watching the casket being lowered into the ground. "By not bailing him out. By filing for the restraining order. By going to stay with Melissa instead of standing by my man." "They're grieving," I reminded her, though I'd noticed their coolness as well. "And they don't know the whole story." "Should I tell them?" she asked, watching as Jason's mother placed a single rose on the descending casket. "About the fraud attempt? About his forging my signature to steal our children's education money? Would that make this easier or harder for them?" I considered the question carefully. What purpose would it serve? Would it bring you peace to have them understand? Or would it only add to their pain without changing anything meaningful? She was silent for a long moment, watching the funeral director signal that it was time for family members to throw their handful of earth onto the casket. "No," she said finally. "Let them keep their image of their son intact. It's all they have left now." It was a moment of profound maturity, of empathy despite her own pain. I squeezed her hand, wordlessly proud of the woman she was revealing herself to be in this crucible of grief and change. After the funeral, after the awkward reception where distant relatives and Jason's colleagues murmured condolences and avoided eye contact, after Jason's parents returned to their hotel with stilted promises to stay in touch about the grandchildren, we finally went home.
My home.
Now theirs as well, at least for the foreseeable future. "Welcome," I said simply as I opened the door, ushering Rebecca and the children inside. Their suitcases and essential belongings had been delivered earlier, the rooms prepared as best I could manage given the circumstances. Ethan and Lily stood in the foyer, gazing up at the soaring ceiling, the elegant staircase, their eyes wide with wonder despite the grief that had shadowed them all week. "It's like a castle," Lily whispered, her hand finding mine instinctively. "It's just a house," I corrected gently, touched by her simple amazement. "But it's our house now, for as long as you want it to be." "Can we see our rooms?" Ethan asked, the natural resilience of childhood allowing him a moment of excitement amid the sadness. "Of course," I said, leading them up the stairs. "I've set them up with the basics, but we can decorate them however you like. Make them your own." I'd prepared the rooms with careful thought. Ethan's with space for his dinosaur collection and science books, Lily's with a reading nook and display shelves for her treasured stuffed animals. Nothing elaborate or overwhelming, just comfortable spaces ready to be personalized. Their reactions were everything I could have hoped for, genuine delight as they explored their new domains, claiming territory, making plans for where their things would go. "Look, Mom," Lily called to Rebecca, who had been hanging back, watching with tired eyes. "Grandma made a special place for Bunny." Rebecca moved to join her daughter, examining the small shelf where I'd placed a few stuffed animals I'd rescued from their house, including the well-loved rabbit with pink ears that Lily had mentioned. "That was thoughtful of Grandma," she said, meeting my eyes over Lily's head with a gratitude that needed no words. Later, after the children were settled in their new rooms, not sleeping yet, but at least comfortable, surrounded by familiar possessions in unfamiliar spaces, Rebecca and I sat in the kitchen, cups of tea growing cold between us. "Thank you," she said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. "For all of this. For being there through everything. For giving us a home when ours is falling apart in every possible way." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "That's what family does. What I've always wanted to do, if you'd let me." She flinched slightly at that, acknowledgement of the barriers she'd erected between us over the years. "I know," she admitted, "and I'm sorry for pushing you away for so long, for being so cold, so ungrateful." "Why did you?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally finding voice. "What changed? We were so close when you were younger, and then—" Rebecca stared into her tea, as if the answers might be found in its depths. "It wasn't one thing," she said slowly. "It was a process. After college, when I met Jason and his family, they were so different from us.
So polished.
So effortless in their privilege. I wanted to be part of that world so badly. And you? She hesitated. I reminded you of where you came from. I finished for her. Of the life you were trying to leave behind. She nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. It sounds so shallow, saying it out loud. So petty and ungrateful. But yes, that was part of it. And then there was Jason himself. He was subtly dismissive of you. Never outright rude, but always with these little comments about your job, your apartment, your clothes. And you didn't defend me, I said, not accusingly, but seeking understanding. No, she admitted, her voice small. I was afraid of losing him, of losing the life he represented. So I started seeing you through his eyes. Started feeling embarrassed instead of proud. Started making excuses not to visit, not to include you. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. It was wrong, Mom.
So wrong.
And then it just became habit, this distance between us. This pretense that I was somehow self-made, that I hadn't come from a mother who sacrificed everything for me. The confession hung between us, painful in its honesty, but necessary for healing. And now, I asked, now that everything's changed for both of us, where do we go from here? Rebecca wiped her eyes, straightening her shoulders slightly. I want to do better, she said simply. Be better. For you, for my children, for myself. I want to rebuild what I broke between us, if you'll let me. If it's not too late. It's not too late, I assured her, reaching across the table to take her hand. It's never too late, not while we're both still here. We talked long into the night, excavating years of misunderstandings and hurts, laying foundations for a new relationship built on honesty and mutual respect rather than obligation and resentment. It wasn't a magical healing, too much had happened for that, but it was a beginning, a willingness on both sides to see each other clearly and love each other anyway. As Rebecca finally headed upstairs to check on the children before seeking her own rest, she paused in the doorway. Your attorney, Martin, she said, a question in her voice. He's more than just your lawyer, isn't he? The perceptiveness of the question caught me off guard. What makes you say that? The way he looks at you, she said simply. The way you seem steadier when he's around. And he's been involved, far more than any attorney would need to be. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, surprised to find myself blushing like a schoolgirl at my age. We've become friends, I acknowledged. Good friends. Beyond our professional relationship. But it's complicated. Rebecca smiled then, a genuine smile that reached her eyes despite the grief and exhaustion shadowing them. Life is complicated, Mom. Doesn't mean you shouldn't embrace the good parts when they come along. She hesitated, then added, he seems like a good man.
Kind. Steady.
The way he's helped us through all this, with no obligation to do so, that says a lot about his character. Yes, I agreed, the single syllable carrying more weight than I'd intended. Just consider it, she said, her smile turning knowing. At our ages, second chances don't come along every day. With that surprisingly mature advice, she left me sitting at the kitchen table, contemplating possibilities I'd barely allowed myself to acknowledge, even in the privacy of my own thoughts. The weeks that followed established new rhythms, new patterns in a household suddenly expanded from 1 to 4. The children returned to school, a difficult transition handled with support from counselors and teachers who understood their fragile emotional state. Rebecca began therapy, confronting not just the trauma of Jason's suicide but deeper issues of identity and self-worth that had shaped her adult choices. And I found myself in an unexpected role, the stabilizing center of a family in healing crisis, the steady presence everyone else could lean on while they rebuilt their shattered world. It wasn't always easy. There were nightmares. Lily's plaintive cries for her father in the dark hours, Ethan's sudden rages against the unfairness of it all, Rebecca's hollow-eyed insomnia as she replayed those final weeks, looking for signs she might have missed. There were practical challenges too, the looming foreclosure on Rebecca's house, the tangle of Jason's finances to unravel, the well-meaning but often intrusive inquiries from friends and acquaintances. Through it all, Martin remained a constant support, his legal expertise navigating the complexities, his personal warmth providing comfort on the hardest days. "You need to rest," he told me one evening, arriving unannounced with dinner for all of us after a particularly difficult day. Ethan had had a meltdown at school, Lily had refused to eat, and Rebecca had spent hours on the phone with Jason's life insurance company, which was investigating the suicide clause in his policy. "I'm fine," I insisted, though exhaustion pulled at every limb, every thought. "You're not," he countered gently. "You've been everyone's rock for weeks now. Even rocks need support sometimes." He stayed that night, not in a romantic sense, but as a friend ensuring I took care of myself for once, insisting I eat a proper meal, making me sit while he handled the children's bedtime routine with surprising skill, brewing tea, and simply listening as I voiced fears and frustrations I'd been holding inside to spare Rebecca. It became a pattern, Martin appearing when needed most, offering practical help and emotional ballast, becoming a fixture in our evolving family dynamic. The children grew to expect his visits, to light up when his car appeared in the driveway. Rebecca, too, came to rely on his steady presence, his legal guidance, his willingness to step in when tasks overwhelmed her still fragile coping mechanisms. And I found myself looking for him, missing him when days passed without his presence, feeling a kind of completion when he was near that I hadn't experienced since Frank's death decades earlier. "You care for him," Rebecca observed one afternoon as we watched Martin teaching Ethan to play chess on the patio, Lily helping with more enthusiasm than skill. "Yes," I admitted, no longer seeing any point in denial. "I do. And he clearly cares for you," she continued. "So, what's holding you back? Why the hesitation?" I considered the question seriously, trying to articulate the caution that had kept me from acknowledging the growing feelings between Martin and me. "Fear, I suppose," I said finally. "Fear that I'm misreading the situation, that he sees me as a client, a friend at most, that I'm too old to start something new." Rebecca laughed softly, the sound still rare enough in our grieving household to catch my attention. "Mom, he's here more often than not. He brings dinner. He helps with the kids. He fixed the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom last week, for heaven's sake. Those aren't the actions of a man who sees you as just a client." "Maybe not," I conceded. "But still." "But nothing," she interrupted firmly. "If these past months have taught me anything, it's that life is short and unpredictable. Too short to waste time second-guessing happiness when it presents itself." It was strange, this role reversal, my daughter now giving me relationship advice, encouraging me toward possibilities I approached with caution. Strange, but not unwelcome. Another sign of our evolving relationship, of the mutual respect that was replacing the hierarchical mother-daughter dynamic of the past. That evening, after the children were in bed and Rebecca had retreated to her room with a novel, a small but significant sign of her gradual healing, Martin and I sat on the back patio, enjoying the mild spring evening, a bottle of wine open between us. "The kids seem better," he observed, his gaze on the darkened garden where solar lights created pools of gentle illumination along the pathways. "More settled." "They are," I agreed. "The nightmares are less frequent. Ethan's anger is subsiding. Lily's starting to play normally again. They're adapting, I suppose. Children do." "And Rebecca?" I considered my daughter's progress. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The therapy is helping. Having a routine again helps. But there are still days when it all catches up with her. The grief, the guilt, the uncertainty about the future. "And you?" Martin asked, turning to face me directly. "How are you, Eleanor? Not as a grandmother, not as a mother, but as yourself?" The question caught me off guard. So few people in my life had ever asked about me separately from my roles, my responsibilities. "I'm finding my way," I said honestly. "Learning how to be both supportive of them and true to myself. How to help without enabling. I hesitated, then decided to be fully candid. How to accept that some good things have come from terrible circumstances. This time with Rebecca and the children, it's a gift I never expected to have. A second chance I'm grateful for, even while I wish it hadn't come at such a cost." Martin nodded, understanding in his eyes. Life rarely gives us uncomplicated blessings. The good and the painful often come tangled together. Yes, I agreed, thinking of the lottery when that had changed everything, bringing both challenges and opportunities one could never have anticipated. They do. A comfortable silence settled between us, broken only by the soft chirping of crickets and the distant sound of a neighbor's wind chimes. I was acutely aware of Martin beside me, of the scant inches separating us on the cushioned patio furniture, of the way the soft lighting caught the silver in his hair. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice different somehow, deeper, more personal. "There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Something not related to legal matters or family concerns." My heart quickened, though I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Oh," he set his wineglass down, turning to face me fully. "These past months, working with you, getting to know you, they've meant a great deal to me. More than I expected. More than would be strictly professional." I waited, hardly daring to breathe, as he continued. "I find myself thinking about you when we're not together. Looking forward to seeing you, to our conversations, to simply being in your presence. And I've been wondering if perhaps, if possibly, you might feel something similar." The directness of it, the absence of games or manipulation, was so refreshing, so perfectly aligned with the man I'd come to know, that I couldn't help but smile. "I do," I said simply, deciding that at 63, I was too old for coyness or false modesty. "Feel something similar, that is." His smile in response was like sunrise, gradual, warm, illuminating. "I'm very glad to hear that," he said, reaching for my hand, "because I'd like to explore what that might mean if you're willing. Not as attorney and client, though I'd certainly continue to provide legal counsel as needed, but as Martin and Eleanor. Two people who found an unexpected connection at a time in life when such things are rare and precious." "I'd like that," I said, my voice steadier than the fluttering in my chest. "Very much." He leaned forward then, slowly enough that I could have pulled away if I'd wanted to, and brushed his lips against mine, a gentle, questioning kiss that carried both tenderness and promise. When he drew back, the look in his eyes, wonder, happiness, a touch of disbelief, likely mirrored my own. "Well," he said, his smile turning slightly sheepish, "that was even better than I'd imagined. And I've imagined it quite a bit, I must confess." I laughed, feeling suddenly impossibly young despite the years etched on both our faces. "Martin Chen, are you admitting to unprofessional thoughts about a client?" "Absolutely," he agreed, unapologetic. "Highly unprofessional, persistent, increasingly distracting. How terribly unethical of you," I teased, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in decades. "Indeed," he said solemnly, though his eyes danced with humor. "I should probably be disbarred. Or, at the very least, required to take you to dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere nice. Just the two of us." "That seems like an appropriate punishment," I agreed, matching his mock-serious tone. "I accept on behalf of the injured party." He laughed then, the sound rich and warm in the night air, and leaned in to kiss me again, less tentative this time, more certain of his welcome. I responded in kind, amazed at how natural it felt, how right, to be sharing this moment with this man who had become so essential to my new life. When we eventually said goodnight, properly at the door, with the promise of tomorrow's dinner hanging between us, I walked back into my house feeling changed in some fundamental way. Not just by the kiss, sweet as it had been, but by the possibility it represented, that at 63, with decades of loss and struggle behind me, I might still have chapters of joy ahead. That wealth wasn't the only second chance life had granted me. The lawsuit took us all by surprise. It arrived 6 months after Jason's death, as life was finally settling into new patterns. Rebecca had found part-time work as an administrative assistant at the children's school, a position that allowed her to be present for them while beginning to rebuild her own identity and independence. The children were healing, still missing their father, but no longer shattered by his absence. And Martin and I had established a relationship that brought joy and companionship to both our lives, a comfortable rhythm of dinners and outings and quiet evenings together. Then the certified letter came, addressed to both Rebecca and me. "What is it?" she asked, watching as I opened the envelope at the breakfast table, the children already departed for school, the house quiet around us. I scanned the legal document, my blood running cold as I grasped its implications. It's a lawsuit. From Jason's parents. They're suing us both, me for undue influence leading to emotional distress, and you for wrongful death. They're claiming we essentially drove Jason to suicide through our actions. Rebecca's face drained of color.
What?
How can they? What are they saying exactly? I read further, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. They claim I used my lottery winnings to manipulate and control you and Jason, setting conditions that caused him extreme emotional distress. And they claim you abandoned him in his time of need by filing for the restraining order and refusing to bail him out, directly contributing to his mental state before his suicide. That's insane, Rebecca whispered, her voice barely audible. They don't know anything about what really happened, about the fraud, about what our life was really like. They're grieving, I said, trying to be charitable despite my rising fury. They've lost their son, and they're looking for someone to blame. So they're blaming us? Rebecca's shock was turning to anger, color returning to her cheeks in hot flags. After everything we've been through? After what the kids have suffered? They think we don't have enough pain already. I reached for my phone. I'm calling Martin. We need legal advice before we respond to this in any way. Martin arrived within the hour, his face grave as he reviewed the lawsuit documents spread across my dining room table. "This is aggressive," he said finally, choosing his words with care. "And largely without merit from a legal standpoint. But that doesn't mean it won't be painful and potentially damaging to fight. What are our options?" I asked, my arm around Rebecca, who sat rigidly beside me, still processing this new assault on her already fragile peace. "We could settle," Martin said, though his tone suggested he didn't favor this approach. "Offer a financial payment in exchange for them dropping the suit. It would be the quickest resolution, but it might feel like admitting wrongdoing when there was none." "No," Rebecca said immediately, surprising me with her vehemence. "I won't give them money to make false accusations go away. I won't have my children grow up thinking their mother and grandmother somehow caused their father's death. I won't accept that lie. Not for any amount of money." Martin nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Then we fight it. We build a defense that not only refutes their claims, but establishes the actual facts of what occurred. Jason's attempted fraud. His financial mismanagement that led to the foreclosure. The forged documents. All of it. It will be public," I warned Rebecca, understanding what this would mean. "Everything will come out, in court documents, possibly in the local media. Are you prepared for that? For the children to potentially learn about their father's actions someday?" She was quiet for a long moment, weighing the implications. "They'll learn eventually anyway," she said finally. "And I'd rather they know the complicated truth than a simplified lie that blames us for something we didn't do." She straightened, a new resolve in her bearing. "We fight." And fight we did, over the next grueling months. Martin assembled a legal team that methodically documented every aspect of Jason's financial dealings, his attempted fraud, his deception of both the bank and Rebecca. They gathered statements from the bank manager who had reported the forged documents, from the police officers who had arrested Jason, from the therapist Rebecca had been seeing since his death, who could attest to her grief and trauma. The case became a local sensation, picked up by media outlets hungry for the dramatic combination of lottery winnings, family conflict, and tragic death. Reporters camped outside my gate, shouted questions when Rebecca or I ventured out for necessary errands, published speculation and half-truths that added to our stress. Through it all, we maintained a united front, Rebecca and I supporting each other, protecting the children as best we could from the ugliness, finding strength in the family bond we'd rebuilt from the ashes of past misunderstandings. The case never made it to trial. 2 weeks before our scheduled court date, Jason's parents' attorney contacted Martin with an offer to drop the lawsuit, not because they'd had a change of heart, but because the evidence assembled for our defense made it clear they couldn't win. The documentation of Jason's financial misdeeds, his fraud attempt, his pattern of deception was simply too overwhelming to overcome. "It's over," Martin told us, arriving at the house with the formal dismissal documents in hand. "They've withdrawn all claims, agreed to a non-disparagement clause, and committed to no further legal action against either of you." Relief washed through me, so powerful I had to sit down. "Thank God," I whispered. "It's finally over." But Rebecca remained standing, her expression troubled. "Did they say why? Why they're dropping it now?" Martin hesitated, exchanging a glance with me before answering. "They reviewed the evidence we prepared for trial. The documentation about Jason's actions. I believe they finally understood the full picture of what their son had done." Rebecca nodded slowly, absorbing this. "So they know now? About all of it?" "Yes," Martin confirmed. "They know." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are they all right? I mean, this must have been devastating for them, to learn these things about their son." Her compassion, even for people who had caused us months of stress and pain, moved me deeply. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Rebecca had emerged from this crucible with a strength and empathy I couldn't help but admire. "I don't know," Martin admitted. Their attorney didn't share their personal reaction. But they did ask one thing, that you consider allowing them to maintain a relationship with the children. Not immediately, but perhaps in time, when wounds have healed somewhat. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "They're still Ethan and Lily's grandparents. They've lost enough already." With the lawsuit behind us, life began to normalize in ways that had seemed impossible in the dark days following Jason's death. Rebecca continued her job at the school, finding satisfaction in work that connected her to the community while allowing her to be present for her children. The kids thrived in the stable environment we'd created together, their grief not forgotten but integrated into lives that still contained joy, growth, and possibility. And Martin and I continued our relationship, moving forward with the measured pace of people who had lived long enough to know that good things deserve time and care to develop properly. We didn't rush toward formal commitments or labels, content to simply enjoy each day's connection, each shared experience, each quiet recognition of how fortunate we were to have found each other at this stage of life. 1 year to the day after I'd won the lottery, I hosted a dinner party in my home, our home now, filled with life and laughter in ways I could never have imagined when I first walked through its elegant rooms. "A toast," Martin proposed, raising his glass as we sat around the dining table. Rebecca, the children, Margie from Danwell's, Janice from the library, a few new friends we'd made along the way. To Eleanor, whose grace and strength have guided this family through both triumph and tragedy, whose generosity extends far beyond financial wealth to the true riches of the heart. To Grandma, Ethan and Lily Carist, raising their sparkling cider glasses with exaggerated care. To Mom, Rebecca added softly, her eyes meeting mine across the table, conveying volumes in that simple gaze. Later, after the guests had departed and the children were in bed, I stood on the back patio, gazing up at a sky scattered with stars. Martin joined me, slipping his arm around my waist in a gesture that had become comfortably familiar. "Happy anniversary," he said, "of the day that changed everything." "Not everything," I corrected gently. "The money changed our circumstances, yes. But the important things, the love, the forgiveness, the second chances, those came from choices we all made, not from the lottery." He considered this, then nodded.
True.
Though I can't help but think that sometimes people need a catalyst, something that shakes them out of established patterns, forces them to see what truly matters. Like telling your mother to die in silence just days before she wins millions? I suggested, able now to find wry humor in what had once been a devastating wound. "Exactly," he agreed. "Not a recommended strategy, but effective in its way." I laughed, leaning into his solid warmth beside me. "I've been thinking lately about what to do with the money, beyond what we're already using for our lives here, for the children's education funds, for basic security." "Oh," he prompted, curious. "I want to create a foundation," I explained, voicing an idea that had been forming for months. For families in crisis, especially older women raising grandchildren due to parental absence, addiction, incarceration, death. People like I might have been if circumstances had been slightly different. People who need not just financial help but practical support, community, dignity. Martin smiled, unsurprised. It suits you perfectly. Using your unexpected fortune to create the kind of support system you once needed yourself. Rebecca wants to help run it. I continued. She has ideas about programs, about approaches that respect people's autonomy while providing genuine assistance. She's remarkable, Martin. The way she's grown through all of this. Like her mother, he observed, his gaze warm with admiration. The strength was always there, just waiting for the right conditions to flourish. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars, listening to the night sounds of the garden. I thought about the journey of the past year, from that crushing phone call with Rebecca, to the lottery win, to Jason's betrayal and death, to the lawsuit, to this moment of peace and possibility. You know, I said finally, when that ticket won, I thought it was fate's cruel joke, giving me money right after Rebecca had revealed how little she wanted me in her life. I couldn't imagine then that we'd end up here, together, stronger than we've ever been. Life's like that, Martin mused. The very thing that seems like our greatest pain often creates the path to our greatest joy, if we're brave enough to walk it. Copier Publicar. When my only daughter told me to just die in silence, I hung up the phone with trembling hands and cried myself to sleep. 3 days later, I won $400 million in the state lottery. That's when I realized fate has a sense of humor crueler than any comedian I've ever known. If you're watching this story unfold, go ahead and subscribe. Comment below if you've ever had someone come crawling back after they showed their true colors. Trust me, this gets messier than a toddler with birthday cake. The morning I made that call, I'd been so hopeful. For the first time in nearly 5 years, I had news that might bridge the growing canyon between my daughter Rebecca and me. Something that might make her proud. Something that would prove I wasn't the burden she seemed to think I was. I'd gotten the job. At 63 years old, with arthritis gnawing at my knuckles and knees that protested every stare, I'd landed a position as a part-time librarian assistant. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't going to make me rich. But it was dignity. It was purpose. It meant I wouldn't have to ask Rebecca for money again, not after the last time when she'd sighed so heavily I thought she might collapse from the effort. I'd rehearsed exactly what I would say. How I'd keep my voice casual, not desperate for her approval. How I wouldn't mention that I'd gone to 4 interviews before this one, or how the young manager had looked at my gray hair with barely concealed skepticism. I wouldn't tell her I'd worn the blue blouse she'd given me 3 Christmases ago, the one still with tags because it had been too nice to waste on my everyday life. I dialed her number at exactly 10:15 a.m. Not too early to disturb her morning routine, not during work hours when she'd be busy, not during her lunch when she'd be with colleagues. I'd memorized her schedule over the years, plotting my rare calls into the narrow windows when she might actually answer. When she picked up on the 4th ring, I felt a flutter in my chest. Her voice came through with that crispness that reminded me of her father, direct, impatient. "Mom? What is it now?" Just 4 words, and already I could feel her pulling away, as if my name on her caller ID had been a trap she'd accidentally sprung. "Rebecca, honey, I have some good." She cut me off. "I don't have time for this. Whatever bill you can't pay or whatever problem you've got, I can't help you."
Stop calling me, Mom.
"I'll not pay for your nursing home bills. Just die in silence." The venom in her voice wasn't new, but the words, they were arrows tipped with a poison I hadn't tasted before. My tongue felt suddenly thick, my throat closing around whatever joy I'd planned to share. "I understand," I managed to whisper, though I didn't understand at all. "I won't bother you again." I hung up gently, as if the phone itself might shatter along with my heart. For hours, I sat in my faded armchair by the window, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Was it after her father died? Was it when I couldn't afford to help with her wedding? Or had it been building slowly, silently, a resentment growing like a tumor neither of us had detected until it was malignant?